Top 75 Salesforce Revenue Cloud Interview Scenarios. The only 75 scenarios you need to pass a Salesforce CPQ and billing interview.
The Salesforce Revenue Cloud Architect Masterclass, the ultimate 75 scenario masterclass.
Preparing for a modern Revenue Cloud, or CPQ technical interview, requires moving far beyond simple point and click configuration definitions. Senior architects and hiring managers evaluate your ability to solve high-stakes business incidents, protect corporate margins, and design performance system boundaries. To help you master these discussions, we have consolidated 75 real-world technical scenarios into 11 logical categories, spanning the entire end-to-end commercial lifecycle.
The 11 architectural lifecycle categories.
We have organized this masterclass across the 11 pillars of modern enterprise revenue systems. Category 1, Product Configuration and Bundle Design Scenarios. Category 2, Pricing and Discounting Scenarios. Category 3, Quote Lifecycle Scenarios. Category 4, Contract Management Scenarios. Category 5, Subscription and Renewal Management Scenarios. Category 6, Usage-Based Billing and Consumption Models Scenarios. Category 7, CPQ and Billing Integration and Order-to-Cash Scenarios. Category 8, Advanced Amendments, Renewals and Proration Scenarios. Category 9, Integrations, Migration and Governance Scenarios. Category 10, Advanced Architecture and Specialist Features Scenarios. Category 11, Modern Architecture, Agentforce and the Core Platform Scenarios. Total 11 categories. Let's dive into Category 1.
Category 1, Product Configuration and Bundle Design.
Product Configuration and Bundle Design establish the structural commercial catalog inside your quoting engine. This category focuses on how to model complex product options, enforce technical dependencies, design mutually exclusive product sets, and optimize catalog performance for massive payloads. Mastering these scenarios ensures sales representatives configure error-free bundles that flow cleanly to downstream billing and fulfillment engines.
Category 1, Product Configuration and Bundle Design.
Here are the 10 critical configuration scenarios we will solve in this category. Scenario 1, Configuring mandatory versus optional components in a hardware bundle. Scenario 2, Enforcing cross-product dependencies during software configuration. Scenario 3, Designing mutually exclusive contract term selections inside a bundle. Scenario 4, Restructuring massive 500 component bundles to optimize performance. Scenario 5, Automating the injection of mandatory services based on server selection. Scenario 6, Implementing region-specific search filtering to prevent compliance violations. Scenario 7, Designing a complex server hardware nested bundle configuration model. Scenario 8, Implementing catalog segregation between hardware and software sales teams. Scenario 9, Retiring legacy products for new sales while keeping active subscriptions running. Scenario 10, Troubleshooting missing CPQ data rules and deployment failures in production. Total 10 scenarios. Let's dive into Scenario 1.
Scenario 1, a customer purchases a laptop bundle containing a laptop, warranty, and support package. Warranty should be mandatory to meet compliance, while support is optional. If reps forget the warranty, downstream ERP fulfillment fails. How would you configure this bundle?
Answer: I would construct a nested product bundle utilizing product options to enforce selection behavior natively. 1. Define the lead product. Establish the laptop as the primary product in the bundle. 2. Create a feature. Build a feature named Warranties and Support to organize the related products logically in the UI. 3. Enforce the warranty. Add the warranty as a product option, setting the selected and required checkboxes to true. This strictly prevents the rep from removing it. 4. Allow optional support. Add the support package as a product option, leaving required false, allowing the rep to select it optionally. Pro tip: if the warranty is legally required but absolutely free, consider hiding it from the quote line editor UI entirely using the quote line visibility field. It still syncs to the order but reduces visual clutter for the sales rep.
Scenario 2, a specialized software module requires a base platform license to function. Sales reps frequently quote the module alone to win deals quickly, causing post-sales provisioning engines to crash because the prerequisite platform is missing. How would you enforce this dependency?
Answer: I would implement CPQ product rules rather than standard Salesforce validation rules to catch the error during the configuration phase. 1. Create a product rule. Set the rule type to validation. 2. Define the error condition. Configure it to check if the quote line contains the software module but does not contain the base platform. 3. Create the error message. Write a clear message instructing the rep to add the base platform to resolve the error. 4. Set the evaluation event. Set this to save to block the user from exiting the configurator with an invalid state. Pro tip: if the base platform is always required with the module, use a product rule of type selection instead of validation. Use an add action to automatically inject the base platform into the quote, saving the rep a click and improving the user experience.
Scenario 3. A telecom customer can choose either a 12-month, 24-month, or 36-month contract term. Reps are accidentally adding multiple term products to the same quote, breaking the billing engine logic when calculating the upfront hardware subsidy. How would you configure mutual exclusivity?
Answer: I would solve this using a combination of features and option constraints. First, I would create a feature named Contract Term within the main bundle and set both min options and max options to 1 to force a single choice. Then, I would associate the 12, 24, and 36-month terms as product options under this feature. If selecting a specific term should disable other incompatible hardware options, I would add option constraints of type exclusion to handle the cross-product logic. Pro tip: if the pricing relies heavily on the term length, consider using multi-dimensional quoting (MDQ) instead of separate products for terms. MDQ allows you to sell a single subscription product while cleanly dividing pricing across distinct yearly segments.
Scenario 4. An industrial product bundle contains 500 components. Every time a sales rep clicks Save in the quote line editor, the system freezes for 45 seconds, leading to timeout errors and extreme user frustration. How would you optimize performance?
Answer: a 500-component bundle violates CPQ performance best practices. I would architect a bundle restructuring plan to optimize the data load. 1. Implement dynamic features. Query and display options dynamically rather than loading all 500 options into the DOM simultaneously. 2. Enable large quote experience. Turn this on in CPQ package settings to prevent the UI from attempting to render massive line item sets at once. 3. Consolidate micro-components. If screws and cables are always sold together, combine them into a single installation kit SKU to reduce line items. 4. Optimize price rules. Review and minimize the number of active price rules evaluating on calculate, shifting non-critical logic to before save or after calculate. Pro tip: heavy use of QCP quote calculator plugin scripts on massive bundles is a primary cause of timeouts. If custom JavaScript is iterating over 500 lines on every edit, you must refactor the QCP to only run on modified lines.
Scenario 5. Whenever a cloud server is added to a quote, a mandatory implementation service must be added. Currently, reps forget to add it, leading to contracts signed without implementation fees and resulting in revenue leakage. How would you configure this automatic behavior?
Answer: I would use a product rule designed for automated selection rather than relying on reps to remember manual steps. 1. Create a product rule. Set the rule type to selection. 2. Define the error condition. Set the logic to trigger if the quote contains the cloud server product. 3. Define the action. Create an action for the rule with the type set to add, targeting the implementation service product. 4. Set the evaluation event. Set the rule to evaluate always so the product is injected the moment the server is selected. Pro tip: if you use a standard add action, the rep can still manually delete the injected product. Because the implementation service is strictly mandatory, use the strongest enforcement mechanism available in your Revenue Cloud implementation. In environments that support and enable an add style action, use it directly. Otherwise, combine a standard add action with a separate validation product rule that blocks users from saving the quote if the service is removed.
Scenario 6. A global enterprise has distinct product catalogs for NA, EMEA, and APAC due to differing electrical compliance standards. APAC sales reps are accidentally quoting European power supplies, causing massive returns and compliance violations at the shipping phase. How would you achieve region-specific filtering?
Answer: I would implement search filters and custom actions to dynamically restrict product visibility based on quote context. First, I would create a custom formula field on the quote object that pulls the region from the associated account. Then, I would create a search filter on the product object that compares the product's region field to the quote's region field, ensuring the default add products custom action strictly respects this filter. Pro tip: if dealing with thousands of products and complex multidimensional territories, standard search filters become difficult to manage. In advanced scenarios, use price books assigned by region or territory to completely isolate the catalogs natively at the database level.
Scenario 7. A configurable server product requires CPU, RAM, and storage selections. If a user chooses an enterprise CPU, the RAM options must be filtered to show only high-speed memory, preventing incompatible hardware builds. How would you design the configuration model?
Answer: this requires a highly structured nested bundle with dynamic features and option constraints to prevent incompatible builds. 1. Define the lead product. Create server as the primary product with 3 features: CPU, RAM, and storage. 2. Enforce CPU selection. Set min options and max options to 1 on the CPU feature to force a single selection. 3. Filter incompatible RAM. Set min options to 1 on RAM. Use option constraints to hide standard RAM options when the enterprise CPU is selected. 4. Implement dynamic features. If the list of RAM and storage SKUs is massive, replace static product options with dynamic features to query compatible SKUs at runtime based on the CPU selection. Pro tip: hardware configuration often requires complex mathematical validation, like ensuring the total power draw of all components does not exceed the power supply rating. Standard product rules cannot do heavy math. You will likely need a summary variable combined with a validation rule to ensure the build does not exceed wattage limits.
Scenario 8. The company has a hardware team and a software team operating in the same Salesforce org. The hardware team keeps accidentally quoting software products they are not trained to sell, causing contract errors and commission disputes. How would you implement catalog segregation?
Answer: I would use a combination of custom actions and user profile data to dynamically control the product selection UI. 1. Tag the user. Add a team segment field to the user or profile object to identify their department. 2. Create custom actions. Create separate custom actions for add hardware and add software. 3. Apply action conditions. Use custom action conditions to only show the add hardware button to the hardware team and the add software button to the software team. 4. Configure search filters. Set search filters within those custom actions to strictly filter the product family being queried. Pro tip: do not use complex product rules validation or selection to hide hundreds of products based on user profile. Evaluating hundreds of rules on every search will kill performance. Filtering at the custom action layer prevents the products from loading into the UI in the first place, ensuring fast performance.
Scenario 9. A SaaS company is retiring legacy data plan V1. They do not want sales reps to quote this on new deals, but thousands of existing customers still have active contracts for V1. If you deactivate the product, the renewal engine crashes. How would you handle hiding it from sales reps while keeping subscriptions active?
Answer: you must never uncheck the active flag on a product that exists on active contracts. Instead, I would keep the product active so renewals and amendments continue to function properly, but remove it from product selection. I would achieve this by updating search filters, product selection rules, or catalog visibility controls. As a legacy fallback, you can also use the component checkbox, but filtering at the custom action layer is much more flexible and scalable. Pro tip: if you want to force customers to migrate off the legacy plan upon renewal, define a renewal product on the legacy product record. During the renewal quote generation, CPQ will automatically swap the legacy V1 product for the new V2 product.
Scenario 10. You built a complex set of product rules and price rules in a full sandbox. Everything tests perfectly. You deploy to production via a standard change set. Immediately, sales reps report that validation rules are firing incorrectly and price calculations are returning 0. How would you troubleshoot?
Answer: CPQ deployments frequently fail because CPQ rules are data, not metadata. Standard change sets do not move data. I would investigate the deployment methodology for these common failures. 1. Verify lookup references. Product rules often reference other records via lookup fields. If you migrated records without maintaining strict external IDs, the rule in production might be looking for a sandbox ID. Always enforce external IDs on CPQ configuration records. 2. Check execution order. Price rules require a strict evaluation order. Ensure the numerical order was maintained precisely during data migration. 3. Validate active flags. Sometimes data loaders migrate records successfully but leave related error conditions or actions inactive. 4. Trigger CPQ scripts. In production, go to CPQ package settings and execute post-install scripts to re-index the cache after massive data loads. Pro tip: never deploy CPQ configuration using Salesforce data loader or change sets. Always use a specialized CPQ deployment tool like Salesforce CPQ migration tool, GearSet, or Capado that maintains relational integrity and external IDs automatically across environments.
Category 1 Conclusion.
Mastering product configuration and bundle design is the bedrock of any successful modern Revenue Cloud implementation. By structuring clear product options, enforcing strong constraints, and optimizing catalog load performance, you create an intuitive, mistake-proof configuration workspace. This directly prevents downstream order failures, minimizes fulfillment delays, and drives faster, cleaner sales cycles.
The universal interview tip. Whenever you ask a tech VP or an industry mentor how to crack a tough interview, they all give you the exact same tip. Get familiar with the most commonly asked interview questions. It sounds simple, right? But here is the problem. The search nightmare. Finding the actual most commonly asked questions for senior roles is a nightmare. Generic Google searches only give you basic textbook definitions, and those will not help you clear a lead architect or senior engineer round where production reality matters. Imagine a master vault. Now, imagine a vault where the absolute most commonly asked interview questions for your specific role are already collected for you, perfectly organized by interview rounds like 1. Most commonly asked technical-based question and answers. 2. Most commonly asked scenario-based question and answers. 3. Most commonly asked real-world problem-solving question and answers. 4. Most commonly asked system design question and answers. 5. Most commonly asked behavioral-based question and answers. Cross-domain mastery. I built the ACE Interviews Master Vault for the modern architect. We did not just do this for one role. We covered everything: SAP, cybersecurity, DevOps, software testing, data engineering, Java, and Python. The ultimate all-access deal. Instead of paying for individual PDFs, you can now unlock our entire database. Get over 1,000 plus PDFs containing 50,000 plus of the most asked question and answers for mere 1,499 rupees a month. The elite transformation. Stop studying just to pass. Equip yourself with the cross-domain confidence of a true architect and walk out of your next interview choosing between 2 or 3 elite job offers. Unlock the vault now. The era of buying individual guides is over. Click the link in the video description below right now to unlock the Master Vault. Now, let's get back to the Masterclass.
Transition from Category 1 to Category 2.
Once your product configuration model is locked in and error-free, the next operational hurdle is ensuring those configured products are priced accurately. Configuring a perfect hardware or software bundle is meaningless if the pricing engine applies incorrect margins, misses volume discounts, or allows unauthorized discounting. We now transition to the financial engine of the platform. Category 2. Pricing and discounting, where we unpack discount schedules, price waterfalls, automation, and margin protection.
Category 2. Pricing and discounting.
Pricing and discounting configuration dictates how your enterprise protects its margins while providing sales reps with the commercial flexibility they need to close deals. This category deep dives into modern pricing strategies, including tier-based discount schedules, pricing waterfalls, multi-dimensional pricing, currency localization, and governance controls. Mastering these scenarios ensures you can architect robust, highly performant pricing models that scale without leaking revenue.
Category 2. Pricing and discounting.
Here are the 10 critical pricing and discounting scenarios we will solve in this category. Scenario 11. Configuring a tiered volume discount for license purchases. Scenario 12. Determining the execution sequence of partner and volume discounts. Scenario 13. Designing multidimensional pricing based on segment, duration, and geo. Scenario 14. Troubleshooting calculation errors showing incorrect net pricing. Scenario 15. Implementing approval gates for discounts exceeding executive thresholds. Scenario 16. Automating recurring monthly updates based on market rate pricing. Scenario 17. Regulating manual overrides to prevent bottom-line margin erosion. Scenario 18. Validating multi-currency pricing behavior across global business units. Scenario 19. Modeling promotional discounts limited strictly to initial subscription terms. Scenario 20. Resolving conflicts between overlapping discount schedules. Total 10 scenarios. Let's dive into Scenario 11.
Scenario 11. A corporate customer is purchasing a scalable quantity of user licenses. The sales director wants to apply a tiered volume discount, where the discount percentage increases as quantity thresholds are crossed. For example, 1 to 99 licenses get 0%, 100 to 499 get 10%, 500 plus get 20%. But downstream invoices are calculating incorrect margins due to misaligned prorations. How do you configure this tiered pricing?
Answer: I would configure a native discount schedule tied directly to the product record to manage volume tiering systematically. 1. Create a discount schedule. Set the type to range so the entire quantity is discounted based on the highest tier reached, rather than slab which discounts incrementally per tier. 2. Define the discount tiers. Create 3-tier records, utilizing the core CPQ logic where the lower bound is inclusive and the upper bound is exclusive. Set Tier 1 lower bound, 1 upper bound, 100 Tier 2 lower bound, 100 upper bound, 500 and Tier 3 lower bound, 500 upper bound, null. 3. Associate the schedule. Link the discount schedule to the target product record's discount schedule lookup field. 4. Align proration settings. Ensure that the subscription product's default subscription term and subscription pricing fields are aligned with the quote subscription term, letting the core engine calculate the prorate multiplier correctly without double discounting. Pro tip: if you need different volume discount structures for different customer segments, for example, enterprise versus SMB, do not hardcode multiple discount schedules on the product. Instead, create a price rule that dynamically injects the correct discount schedule lookup ID onto the quote line at runtime based on the account type.
Scenario 12. A strategic reseller quotes a deal qualifying for both a 15% distributor partner discount and a tier-based 10% volume discount. The partner complains that the final net price is lower than expected because the discounts are calculating off the wrong baselines, eroding their margin. How do you control and explain the execution sequence of these discounts?
Answer: this requires a deep understanding of the standard pricing waterfall. In a modern pricing engine, the calculation sequence is strictly fixed. The system first applies the volume discount schedule to the list price or special price, if active, to calculate the regular price. Next, any customer discount is applied to reach the customer price, followed by the partner discount to compute the partner price, and finally, any distributor discount to output the final net price. To resolve the partner's discrepancy, I would audit the fields mapped in the quote calculations to ensure the partner discount is referencing the regular price and not compounding directly against the initial list price. Maintaining this order ensures consistent margins and clear partner billing expectations. Pro tip: to make the pricing waterfall transparent to sales reps, customize the quote line editor field set to show the intermediate pricing fields. List unit price, regular unit price, customer unit price, and net unit price. This eliminates rep confusion and drastically reduces pricing-related support tickets.
Scenario 13. A SaaS product's baseline price depends on the buyer's geographical region, their business market segment, enterprise versus mid-market, and the contract duration. Reps are spending hours calculating these manually in spreadsheets, leading to inconsistent quote values and compliance audits. How would you design this automated pricing?
Answer: I would architect a scalable, table-driven pricing model using lookup queries, rather than writing hundreds of individual hard-coded rules. 1. Design a matrix structure. Depending on data volume and deployment requirements, establish either a custom object for high-volume business user-managed pricing or custom metadata for developer-controlled, deployable configurations to act as the pricing matrix. 2. Populate the pricing matrix. Define fields for region, segment, duration, product, and target price, and upload the master corporate pricing matrix records. 3. Configure a price rule. Build a price rule set to evaluate on initialization to prevent UI calculation lag. 4. Create lookup queries. Define lookup queries on the price rule that match the quote's region, segment, and duration against the pricing matrix to inject the correct list price. Pro tip: avoid utilizing standard price books to manage multidimensional matrices like this. Maintaining hundreds of regional, segment-specific price books creates massive administrative overhead and breaks multi-currency setups. A single standard price book combined with a dynamic custom lookup object is the gold standard for high-scale enterprise pricing.
Scenario 14. A newly deployed quote template shows an incorrect net price for a bundled software subscription, displaying a total that does not match the sum of its discounted parts. Sales reps cannot send proposals, stalling critical end-of-quarter deals. How would you systematically troubleshoot this calculation error?
Answer: I would execute a step-by-step diagnostic audit of the pricing engine execution path to isolate the offending rule or calculation field. 1. Check the pricing waterfall fields. Review the quote line record in a test org and inspect the values of standard fields like list price, customer price, partner price, and net price to see exactly where the calculation deviates. 2. Disable custom price rules. Temporarily deactivate custom price rules one by one to isolate if an active rule is overriding the price calculations or injecting blank values. 3. Verify the calculator plugin QCP. If a custom JavaScript calculator is active, review the console logs during calculation to check if custom script exceptions are halting the execution loop. 4. Re-index the calculation service. Execute post-install scripts within package settings to ensure the calculation service metadata is fully compiled and synchronized in the environment. Pro tip: often, incorrect net prices on subscription lines are simply the result of unexpected proration. Check the subscription term on the product compared to the subscription term on the quote. If they differ, the pricing engine will automatically prorate the price, which is technically correct, but frequently surprises untrained sales reps.
Scenario 15. Executive leadership wants to enforce strict margin control. Any manually applied discount above 20% on a software product requires regional manager approval, and anything above 40% requires VP approval. Standard approval workflows are too rigid and slow down fast-moving sales cycles. How would you implement this?
Answer: I would implement advanced approvals to handle parallel, dynamic, and criteria-driven approval chains. 1. Create approval variables. Build summary variables that aggregate the maximum discount applied across all eligible quote lines. 2. Configure approval rules. Create 2 approval rules. One for manager approval triggering when the maximum discount is greater than 20% and another for VP approval triggering at 40%. 3. Establish dynamic approval paths. Establish custom approver records and map them to approval chains using approver lookups. This dynamically routes the request based on regional or segment data, avoiding hard-coded user IDs. 4. Enable smart approvals. Turn on the smart approvals feature so that if a quote is rejected, modified slightly, and resubmitted, the system does not re-trigger steps that were already approved. Pro tip: do not use standard Salesforce approval processes for complex discounting. Advanced approvals natively support parallel paths, allowing legal and finance to approve at the same time and delegation, which keeps the sales cycle moving rapidly.
The universal interview tip. Whenever you ask a tech VP or an industry mentor how to crack a tough interview, they all give you the exact same tip: get familiar with the most commonly asked interview questions. It sounds simple, right? But here is the problem. The search nightmare. Finding the actual most commonly asked questions for senior roles is a nightmare. Generic Google searches only give you basic textbook definitions, and those will not help you clear a lead architect or senior engineer round where production reality matters. Imagine a master vault. Now, imagine a vault where the absolute most commonly asked interview questions for your specific role are already collected for you, perfectly organized by interview rounds like 1. Most commonly asked technical-based question and answers. 2. Most commonly asked scenario-based question and answers. 3. Most commonly asked real-world problem-solving question and answers. 4. Most commonly asked system design question and answers. 5. Most commonly asked behavioral-based question and answers. Cross-domain mastery. I built the ACE Interviews Master Vault for the modern architect. We did not just do this for one role. We covered everything: SAP, cybersecurity, DevOps, software testing, data engineering, Java, and Python. The ultimate all-access deal. Instead of paying for individual PDFs, you can now unlock our entire database. Get over 1,000 plus PDFs containing 50,000 plus of the most asked question and answers for a mere 1,499 rupees a month. The elite transformation. Stop studying just to pass. Equip yourself with the cross-domain confidence of a true architect and walk out of your next interview choosing between 2 or 3 elite job offers. Unlock the vault now. The era of buying individual guides is over. Click the link in the video description below right now to unlock the Master Vault. Now, let's get back to the masterclass.
Scenario 16. A manufacturing firm sells raw metal commodities whose market prices fluctuate heavily month to month. Sales operations manually updates the price book daily, but reps are still quoting outdated prices because active, unapproved quotes do not refresh automatically, causing significant margin erosion. How do you automate this process?
Answer: this requires a combination of scheduled back-end automation and a standardized quote calculation refresh policy. 1. Decouple standard price books. Avoid direct, daily updates of the standard price book to prevent database locks and audit issues. Instead, utilize a custom pricing matrix or lookup-based pricing table to house the daily shifting index. 2. Integrate with external market API. Build a scheduled integration that pulls daily commodity rates from an external market index and updates the custom pricing matrix. 3. Automate calculation recalculation. Use the quote API in a batch class to programmatically trigger a recalculation on draft quotes, pulling the latest rates from the pricing matrix. 4. Configure rep alerts. Place a warning banner on the quote UI notifying reps when a quote's pricing has been refreshed due to market fluctuations. Pro tip: never force automated pricing updates on quotes in under review or approved status. This violates commercial trust with the client. Restrict your daily recalculation flows strictly to early-stage draft quotes.
Scenario 17. To win competitive bids, sales reps are routinely abusing the additional discount field and manually overriding unit prices on quote lines, which erodes corporate margins and bypasses formal deal desk controls. How do you restrict and audit manual overrides without completely disabling commercial flexibility?
Answer: I would resolve this through a combination of field-level security, validation rules, and targeted system configurations. First, I would uncheck the price editable checkbox on the product records to completely block reps from typing arbitrary numbers directly into the list price field. To manage discounting, instead of leaving additional discount completely open, I would implement a price rule or validation rule that checks the rep's profile and blocks any manual discount that exceeds their authorized threshold, for example, maximum 10% for junior reps. Finally, I would enable robust audit tracking through field history, platform auditing, or custom logging mechanisms on the customer price and net price fields to track revisions. Pro tip: rather than allowing unstructured manual discounts, configure pre-defined discount tiers or promotion codes. Reps can select a valid code from a drop-down, which automatically applies the approved discount, making discounting structured, trackable, and easy to audit.
Scenario 18. A global corporate enterprise operating across USD, Euro, and GBP reports that European sales reps are generating quotes with highly skewed, incorrect localized pricing following a recent system update. How would you systematically troubleshoot and resolve this multi-currency discrepancy?
Answer: before touching system configurations, I would first determine the business-level pricing model and identify the authoritative pricing source, rather than assuming Salesforce standard price books own the data. 1. Establish the pricing model. Determine if the organization expects currency conversion derived strictly from exchange rates, localized pricing fixed localized currency amounts, or a hybrid strategy converting physical hardware but localizing SaaS subscriptions. Match the observed skew against these business expectations. 2. Identify the authoritative source. Map the price execution path to confirm if the price originates natively from standard price book entries, dynamically via price rules, from a custom lookup table, or through an external API integration with an ERP like SAP or Oracle. 3. Validate exchange rates and ACM. If the business model relies on conversion, audit standard Salesforce currency tables, active currency ISO codes, and advanced currency management ACM dated exchange rates to ensure no sudden rate updates skewed the calculations. 4. Audit CPQ and rules custom logic. Ensure custom price rules, formulas, or quote calculator plugins QCP do not contain hard-coded base currencies or execute logic that assumes a single corporate currency, which breaks multi-currency transactions. Pro tip: if your business requires strict localized pricing, for example, always €99 or 99 GBP, rather than a converted rate like €92.45, do not rely on standard currency conversion tables. You must populate distinct, hard-coded price book entries for each currency to maintain commercial consistency.
Scenario 19. A marketing campaign offers new customers a 50% discount on their first year of a 3-year subscription. Sales Ops is manually calculating this, but when the subscription renews, the renewal quote is pulling the discounted first-year price instead of the standard rate, leading to massive revenue leakage. How do you model this promotion cleanly?
Answer: I would model this using multi-dimensional quoting MDQ combined with custom price rules to target only the first segment of the subscription. First, I would configure the subscription product as an MDQ product with yearly segments. Then, I would create a price rule that evaluates when the quote line represents the first MDQ segment and applies the 50% discount to that segment only. Crucially, I would ensure that the renewal pricing method on the product is set to list or that the first-year discount field is flagged as non-subscribable. This configuration ensures that when the renewal opportunity and quote are generated, Year 2 and Year 3 automatically revert to the full, non-discounted standard list price. Pro tip: if you do not want to use MDQ, you can use a custom promotional discount field on the quote line that a price rule applies to Year 1. Ensure this custom field is mapped, so it does times not times carry over to the contracted subscription records, preventing the renewal engine from ever seeing the promo discount.
Scenario 20. A customer qualifies for a Black Friday promo discount schedule and an account volume discount schedule. Both schedules apply to the same software license. During calculation, the system is applying only one schedule at random, leaving reps unable to predict the final price. How do you resolve this conflict?
Answer: this conflict occurs because multiple discounting mechanisms can compete for control of the final calculated price when applied directly to a single product record. To resolve this, I would remove the hard-coded discount schedules from the product record and manage them dynamically via price rules. I would design a price rule with a high evaluation order to evaluate both criteria. If both apply, the rule can use a formula to determine the best outcome, such as applying the higher discount of the two or combining them into a custom, compounded discount value. This dynamic approach guarantees predictable, automated, and conflict-free pricing calculations on every quote. Pro tip: to prevent conflicting schedules from executing in the first place, define a clear discount hierarchy in your business logic. For example, specify that promotional discounts always override standard volume discounts. Use price rules to clear out the standard volume discount schedule lookup on the quote line whenever a promotional coupon code is applied.
Category 2 Conclusion.
Mastering pricing and discounting is what secures your business's financial margins. By implementing dynamic lookup-driven matrices, enforcing programmatic pricing waterfalls, and using advanced approvals to protect bottom-line profits, you build a resilient commercial engine. This ensures your sales force remains agile in negotiations without introducing manual calculation errors or risking margin erosion.
The universal interview tip. Whenever you ask a tech VP or an industry mentor how to crack a tough interview, they all give you the exact same tip. Get familiar with the most commonly asked interview questions. It sounds simple, right? But here is the problem. The search nightmare. Finding the actual most commonly asked questions for senior roles is a nightmare. Generic Google searches only give you basic textbook definitions, and those will not help you clear a lead architect or senior engineer round where production reality matters. Imagine a master vault. Now, imagine a vault where the absolute most commonly asked interview questions for your specific role are already collected for you, perfectly organized by interview rounds like 1. Most commonly asked technical-based question and answers. 2. Most commonly asked scenario-based question and answers. 3. Most commonly asked real-world problem-solving question and answers. 4. Most commonly asked system design question and answers. 5. Most commonly asked behavioral-based question and answers. Cross-domain mastery. I built the ACE Interviews Master Vault for the modern architect. We did not just do this for one role. We covered everything: SAP, cybersecurity, DevOps, software testing, data engineering, Java, and Python. The ultimate all-access deal. Instead of paying for individual PDFs, you can now unlock our entire database. Get over 1,000 plus PDFs containing 50,000 plus of the most asked question and answers for a mere 1,499 rupees a month. The elite transformation. Stop studying just to pass. Equip yourself with the cross-domain confidence of a true architect and walk out of your next interview choosing between 2 or 3 elite job offers. Unlock the vault now. The era of buying individual guides is over. Click the link in the video description below right now to unlock the Master Vault. Now, let's get back to the Masterclass.
Transition from Category 2 to Category 3.
While applying accurate pricing and protecting margins is a vital phase of the deal, a price is only a number on a screen until it is formally documented, routed through internal workflows, and converted into a customer-facing proposal. We now transition from the math engine to the operational engine of the transaction. Category 3. Quote Lifecycle. This is where we handle system performance under heavy quote payloads, document generation, approvals, version control, and multi-system data synchronization.
Category 3. Quote Lifecycle.
The quote lifecycle governs the entire operational span of a deal, from the initial generation of quote lines to workflow approvals, PDF proposal output, and transactional synchronization with opportunities. Mastering this category means knowing how to optimize document rendering, prevent system timeouts, manage complex data sync bottlenecks, and design robust version control processes that keep sales operations running at high velocity.
Category 3. Quote Lifecycle.
Here are the 10 critical quote lifecycle scenarios we will solve in this category. Scenario 21. Optimizing QLE performance when calculation takes several minutes. Scenario 22. Resolving nesting and formatting issues with bundle hierarchies in quote PDFs. Scenario 23. Investigating system crashes during proposal generation on high-volume quotes. Scenario 24. Troubleshooting approval records stuck indefinitely in a pending state. Scenario 25. Architecting version control when clients demand multiple quote variants. Scenario 26. Designing automated quote and line generation upon opportunity creation. Scenario 27. Locking approved quotes to block unauthorized post-approval modifications. Scenario 28. Resolving intermittent synchronization failures between quotes and opportunities. Scenario 29. Integrating third-party localized tax calculations into the quoting phase. Scenario 30. Redesigning a massive quoting model that breaches platform governor limits. Total 10 scenarios. Let's dive into Scenario 21.
Scenario 21. A sales team working on large enterprise deals reports that clicking Save or Quick Calculate in the quote line editor freezes the interface for several minutes, occasionally throwing browser timeout errors. How do you systematically isolate and optimize this calculation latency?
Answer: I would diagnose the latency by separating client-side script execution from server-side database calculations to pinpoint the performance bottleneck. 1. Isolate latency layers. Measure whether the freeze occurs on page load implying heavy search filters or custom scripts. during calculation implying expensive price rules, or on save implying slow triggers or validation rules. 2. Audit the price rule execution. Identify price rules running on always or on edit and refactor them to execute only on calculate or before save to reduce redundant engine cycles during active typing. 3. Evaluate custom JavaScript plugins QCP. Check if a custom QCP script is iterating over the entire quote line array in inefficient loops, and refactor the code to target only modified lines. 4. Set CPQ package boundaries. Leverage standard large quote experience, large quote threshold, and batch quantity settings in the CPQ configuration to offload calculation processes to asynchronous background queues. Pro tip: to quickly isolate the root cause, run a transaction trace using the Salesforce Developer Console. If the trace shows excessive database queries against the lookup product or summary variable tables during calculation, you must consolidate your price rules and index your custom fields.
Scenario 22. Sales reps complain that generated quote PDFs are failing to display the structured bundle hierarchy. Parent products, nested components, and standalone options are printed as flat list items, confusing clients and causing shipment disputes. How do you fix this rendering issue?
Answer: I would configure the native quote template structure to respect and visually represent bundle relationships in the output document. 1. Verify the data layer first. Validate that the parent-child hierarchical relationships actually exist and are maintained correctly on the quote line records before troubleshooting template rendering. 2. Leverage grouping fields. Configure template sections to group quote line items by the standard bundle or package field values. 3. Utilize the component flag. Ensure the standard component checkbox field on the quote line is utilized to conditionally apply indents or different font sizes to nested children. 4. Configure template line columns. Verify that the hide parent record or hide component record fields are not checked on the target template line columns, which inadvertently flattens the hierarchy. Pro tip: if your templates are highly dynamic and standard quote templates cannot support the layout, do not build overly complex custom HTML components. Recommend migrating to an enterprise document generation engine like Conga Composer or DocuSign Gen that natively maps parent-child object hierarchies.
Scenario 23. A sales rep generating a proposal PDF for a quote containing over 1,000 line items experiences a complete system crash, resulting in a maximum CPU time exceeded or Apex heap size error page. How do you investigate and resolve this bottleneck?
Answer: this occurs because standard document generation runs synchronously and hits strict platform governor limits. I would resolve the failure with the following steps. 1. Analyze the engine heap size. Inspect the debug logs to confirm if the crash is caused by retrieving too many custom fields or massive rich text fields on the quote line during template rendering. 2. Reduce query payload. Optimize the quote template by removing unnecessary line columns and disabling the loading of unused related lists like terms and conditions for massive quotes. 3. Offload document processing. Where supported by the platform, shift document generation to asynchronous background processing to completely bypass synchronous rendering timeouts. 4. Establish a split strategy. If synchronous generation is a business necessity, implement a validation rule that prevents proposal generation for quotes exceeding a set line threshold, forcing reps to split the quote. Pro tip: rich text fields containing massive embedded images or inline CSS on product records are major contributors to heap size crashes during document generation. Restrict product descriptions to plain text and house images as external assets.
Scenario 24. A sales rep submits an enterprise quote for approval, but instead of routing to the regional manager, the quote status gets stuck indefinitely in a pending state. The manager receives no alerts, the approval history remains blank, and the quote record is locked, stalling the deal. How do you troubleshoot this state machine failure?
Answer: this failure is typically caused by a mismatch in the advanced approval state machine or an unhandled validation error on the approval record creation. First, I would check the approval requests related list on the quote to see if the records were created but remained unassigned. Next, I would audit the debug logs for the submitting user to check if standard Salesforce automation like an opportunity validation rule or a recursive flow is failing in the background when advanced approvals attempts to update the quote status to pending or lock the record. Finally, I would verify the approval chain and rule configurations to ensure that the rule's criteria are completely met and that the dynamic approver lookup query is returning a valid active user ID. Pro tip: to prevent stuck approvals from silently failing, implement a global error handling flow on the approval request object. If the system fails to assign an approver due to a null lookup query, configure the flow to automatically route the request to a fallback deal desk queue and alert system administrators.
Scenario 25. During contract negotiations, a large enterprise customer requests multiple quote variations, for example, option A with premium support, option B with standard support, and option C with hardware leasing. Sales reps are creating multiple opportunities to house these quotes, skewing the sales pipeline forecast. How do you design a clean version control process?
Answer: this is a classic scoping problem solved by leveraging the native CPQ primary quote architecture. I would instruct the sales team to create a single opportunity for the entire deal, and then generate multiple quote records option A, B, and C underneath that same opportunity. Only one of these quotes should be checked as the primary quote. The standard CPQ engine will dynamically sync only the primary quote's line items and pricing totals to the opportunity products, maintaining an accurate and clean pipeline forecast. If the customer changes their mind and chooses option B, the rep simply unchecks primary on option A and checks it on option B, instantly updating the pipeline without duplicate data. Pro tip: to make managing versions even easier, implement a clone with lines custom action on the quote. Reps can snapshot their current configuration, quickly generate option B with a single click, and use a custom comparison component to view pricing differentials across all related quotes.
The universal interview tip. Whenever you ask a tech VP or an industry mentor how to crack a tough interview, they all give you the exact same tip. Get familiar with the most commonly asked interview questions. It sounds simple, right? But here is the problem. The search nightmare. Finding the actual most commonly asked questions for senior roles is a nightmare. Generic Google searches only give you basic textbook definitions, and those will not help you clear a lead architect or senior engineer round where production reality matters. Imagine a master vault. Now, imagine a vault where the absolute most commonly asked interview questions for your specific role are already collected for you, perfectly organized by interview rounds like 1. Most commonly asked technical-based question and answers. 2. Most commonly asked scenario-based question and answers. 3. Most commonly asked real-world problem-solving question and answers. 4. Most commonly asked system design question and answers. 5. Most commonly asked behavioral-based question and answers. Cross-domain mastery. I built the ACE Interviews Master Vault for the modern architect. We did not just do this for one role. We covered everything: SAP, cybersecurity, DevOps, software testing, data engineering, Java, and Python. The ultimate all-access deal. Instead of paying for individual PDFs, you can now unlock our entire database. Get over 1,000 plus PDFs containing 50,000 plus of the most asked question and answers for a mere 1,499 rupees a month. The elite transformation. Stop studying just to pass. Equip yourself with the cross-domain confidence of a true architect and walk out of your next interview choosing between 2 or 3 elite job offers. Unlock the vault now. The era of buying individual guides is over. Click the link in the video description below right now to unlock the Master Vault. Now, let's get back to the masterclass.
Scenario 26. To streamline transaction speed, sales operations wants a standard baseline quote with predefined software lines to be generated automatically the moment an opportunity is moved to the qualification stage, eliminating manual rep clicks. How would you design this automation?
Answer: I would construct this automation using a record-triggered flow combined with supported CPQ quote generation services or APIs rather than simple database inserts. 1. Define the automation trigger. Set a record-triggered flow to execute on the opportunity object when the stage transitions to qualification. 2. Utilize the quote generation layer. Create an Apex action called by the flow that leverages supported CPQ quote generation services or APIs to programmatically instantiate the quote record. 3. Inject baseline products. Programmatically add the designated standard baseline product IDs as quote lines, forcing the pricing engine to calculate prorations and volume discounts automatically in the background. 4. Establish the primary link. Set the newly created quote record's primary checkbox to true to instantly synchronize the baseline lines back to the opportunity products. Pro tip: do not use standard flow create record elements to generate quote lines directly in the database. Bypassing the CPQ quote API means the pricing engine, validation rules, and product relationships will not execute, resulting in corrupted quote data that fails during contracting.
Scenario 27. A sales rep secures executive approval for a heavily discounted quote. However, before sending the PDF proposal to the customer, the rep manually changes the product quantities on the quote line, bypassing the approval gates while retaining the approved status. How would you prevent these unauthorized post-approval modifications?
Answer: this security risk can be mitigated using a combination of custom validation rules and native quote locking fields. First, I would write a validation rule on the quote line object that evaluates if the parent quote status is approved or submitted. If true, the rule blocks any edits to the quantity, discount, or list price fields. To lock the entire quote record, I would use the native standard lock or a custom locked flag. When the quote is approved, standard automation sets this flag to true, restricting edit permissions on the quote and its related lines to system administrators and the approvals queue. If revisions are required, the rep must click a custom recall or re-evaluate button, which automatically invalidates the approval state and requires reapproval to maintain a clean compliance trail, rather than simply clearing histories. Pro tip: ensure that your locking validation rules explicitly exclude the CPQ system user or calculation service profiles. If the background pricing engine attempts to run automatic recalculations, such as proration adjustments during a contract amendment on a locked quote, the system will throw a database exception and block the contract process.
Scenario 28. A sales director reports that opportunity products are intermittently failing to update when the primary quote is modified. Some deals show identical totals, while others show data mismatches, breaking forecasting accuracy. How would you troubleshoot and resolve this intermittent sync failure?
Answer: opportunity sync failures are caused by validation conflicts, currency mismatches, or database triggers blocking the background sync thread. I would investigate with the following steps. 1. Check active currency alignment. Verify that the opportunity currency ISO code perfectly matches the primary quote's currency ISO code. A mismatch instantly halts the sync engine. 2. Audit opportunity product validation rules. Review validation rules on the opportunity line item object. If a custom validation rule requires a field on creation that CPQ does not map during sync, the transaction fails. 3. Inspect price book integrity. Confirm that all products on the quote exist as active price book entries in the identical price book assigned to the opportunity. 4. Analyze Apex trigger recursion. Check if custom opportunity or opportunity line item Apex triggers are running expensive, recursive operations on update, which can cause the background sync process to time out. Pro tip: to find the exact error blocking the sync, navigate to the standard sync error field on the quote object. This field houses the raw database exception message, for example, custom validation block or deactivated currency thrown when the sync engine attempted to update the opportunity products.
Scenario 29. A corporate customer requires highly localized, regional sales tax estimates to be displayed directly on their quote proposals before signing. The internal legal team warns that tax regulations are too volatile to calculate statically on the platform. How would you design and integrate this external tax requirement?
Answer: this requires integrating an external specialized tax engine such as Avalara Avatax or Vertex into the quote lifecycle. To ensure maximum system speed, I would run the tax integration asynchronously. I would develop a tax service integration layer that uses clean API handlers or supported calculation plugins to capture regional tax data dynamically. The external engine calculates and returns the precise, localized tax estimates, which are written to a custom estimated tax field on the quote line. Crucially, I would design this integration to run only when the rep explicitly clicks a Calculate Tax button or when the quote is submitted for approval, avoiding API callouts on every minor edit to preserve performance. Pro tip: never let the quote tax calculation write to the standard tax fields used by Salesforce billing. Quote tax is merely an estimate and should remain non-financial. Real, binding tax calculations must be executed at the invoice layer during the billing cycle to ensure compliance with legal tax audits.
Scenario 30. A global manufacturing conglomerate routinely builds quotes with over 2,000 line items. The system repeatedly throws Apex CPU time limit exceeded and too many SOQL queries errors, blocking sales completely. How would you architect a redesign of this quoting model?
Answer: to handle this high-volume transaction volume, I would redesign the architecture to decouple the quote load and execute a divide-and-conquer strategy. 1. Implement parent-child quote splitting. Redesign the business process so reps build multiple child quotes representing different delivery locations or product phases, and use a parent quote to aggregate the contract totals. 2. Offload price rules to lookup queries. Replace expensive, multi-criteria price rules with highly optimized lookup queries and custom metadata tables to minimize SOQL evaluations. 3. Refactor JavaScript QCP loops. Review the custom QCP JavaScript code, replacing heavy big O of n to the power of 2 nested loops with highly optimized map-based structures to drastically reduce CPU execution time. 4. Asynchronize sync workloads. Evaluate and consider asynchronous synchronization strategies for very large quotes to completely decouple high-volume transactional syncing from synchronous user saves. Pro tip: if parent-child quote splitting is not viable, recommend migrating the pricing and configuration logic to a dedicated external microservice. The sales reps still operate in the Salesforce UI, but the heavy mathematical lifting is executed in a high-speed external cloud environment, completely bypassing Apex limits.
Category 3 Conclusion.
Mastering the quote lifecycle is what ensures transaction velocity and operational accuracy in your front office. By designing robust, async-ready document pipelines, resolving advanced approval bottlenecks, and protecting your data sync layer from trigger recursions, you eliminate the friction that causes deals to stall. This creates a high-performance path from initial quote line creation directly to a legally binding signature.
The universal interview tip. Whenever you ask a tech VP or an industry mentor how to crack a tough interview, they all give you the exact same tip. Get familiar with the most commonly asked interview questions. It sounds simple, right? But here is the problem. The search nightmare. Finding the actual most commonly asked questions for senior roles is a nightmare. Generic Google searches only give you basic textbook definitions, and those will not help you clear a lead architect or senior engineer round where production reality matters. Imagine a master vault. Now, imagine a vault where the absolute most commonly asked interview questions for your specific role are already collected for you, perfectly organized by interview rounds like 1. Most commonly asked technical-based question and answers. 2. Most commonly asked scenario-based question and answers. 3. Most commonly asked real-world problem-solving question and answers. 4. Most commonly asked system design question and answers. 5. Most commonly asked behavioral-based question and answers. Cross-domain mastery. I built the ACE Interviews Master Vault for the modern architect. We did not just do this for one role. We covered everything: SAP, cybersecurity, DevOps, software testing, data engineering, Java, and Python. The ultimate all-access deal. Instead of paying for individual PDFs, you can now unlock our entire database. Get over 1,000 plus PDFs containing 50,000 plus of the most asked question and answers for a mere 1,499 rupees a month. The elite transformation. Stop studying just to pass. Equip yourself with the cross-domain confidence of a true architect and walk out of your next interview choosing between 2 or 3 elite job offers. Unlock the vault now. The era of buying individual guides is over. Click the link in the video description below right now to unlock the Master Vault. Now, let's get back to the masterclass.
Transition from Category 3 to Category 4.
Once a quote proposal is approved and signed, the front office transaction must transition seamlessly into a long-term commercial relationship. This requires translating ephemeral quote lines into legally binding, trackable assets, active subscriptions, and automated renewal streams. We now transition to the relational core of the platform. Category 4. Contract Management, where we master amendment execution, co-termination math, billing account segregation, and high-volume contract consolidations.
Category 4. Contract Management.
Contract management governs how signed deals are stored, amended, and prepared for future renewals. This category deep dives into the critical relationship between active subscriptions, assets, and contract records. Mastering these scenarios ensures you can process mid-term cancellations, enforce clean co-termination dates, manage complex legal structures, and design scalable contracting logic that keeps downstream invoicing and revenue recognition mathematically accurate.
Category 4. Contract Management.
Here are the 10 critical contract management scenarios we will solve in this category. Scenario 31. Modeling a 3-year multi-subscription agreement with staggered start dates. Scenario 32. Investigating why a contract amendment unexpectedly shifts unrelated product pricing. Scenario 33. Configuring native co-termination for midterm subscription additions. Scenario 34. Troubleshooting background contract activation failures after order creation. Scenario 35. Architecting a contract model that spans multiple legal entities and billing accounts. Scenario 36. Processing complex, midterm partial contract cancellations cleanly. Scenario 37. Diagnosing missing subscription lines on automated renewal opportunities. Scenario 38. Troubleshooting the generation of duplicate asset records during amendments. Scenario 39. Forcing renewal quotes to follow current catalog rates over legacy pricing. Scenario 40. Consolidating and merging multiple active contracts into a single master agreement. Total 10 scenarios. Let's dive into Scenario 31.
Scenario 31. A customer signs a 3-year master agreement containing 3 distinct software subscriptions. To support their phased deployment rollout, the subscriptions must start at different times year 1, year 2, and year 3, but must all end on the identical contract end date. How do you model this staggered start date contract?
Answer: I would construct this model using a single master contract with staggered subscription records, managing the co-termination calculations during the quoting phase rather than the contracting phase. 1. Set the master contract term. Define the master contract record with a flat 36-month duration, establishing the final co-termination end date. 2. Configure staggered quote line dates. On the initial quote, assign explicit future start dates and end dates to individual quote lines to match the rollout phases, for example, year 1, year 2, year 3. 3. Align prorate multipliers. Ensure the engine calculates the correct prorate multipliers on the quote lines based on the remaining days of the term, so co-termination is locked before ordering. 4. Contract the order. Set the contracted checkbox to true on the order, letting the engine instantiate co-terminated subscription records that natively mirror the pre-calculated quote line dates. Pro tip: do not create separate contracts for each staggered subscription phase unless the client requires isolated billing streams. Housing all staggered subscriptions on a single contract record guarantees a clean, unified amendment and renewal pipeline without duplicate contract overhead.
Scenario 32. A sales rep executes a standard amendment to add 10 user licenses to an active contract. When the amendment quote is generated, the pricing of the original, untouched subscription lines suddenly shifts to outdated price book values, breaking commercial trust. How do you investigate and resolve this price shift?
Answer: this issue indicates an unintended recalculation event during amendment quote generation. I would systematically isolate the cause using the following diagnostic steps. 1. Verify original subscription data. Inspect the list price and customer price fields on the original contract subscription records. If these were corrupted during a previous data load, the amendment engine is forced to guess values. 2. Audit active price rules. Identify price rules running on always or on initialization and check if they are executing on the preserved original lines. instead of evaluating only the newly added lines. 3. Check price book alignment. Confirm that the price book assigned to the amendment quote matches the exact historical price book of the original quote. If they differ, the engine may attempt a baseline reprice. 4. Validate bundle preservation. Verify amendment bundle preservation behavior and ensure preserved subscription lines are not being re-evaluated by custom pricing logic. Pro tip: when custom calculation plugins QCP or complex price rules are active, ensure they contain an explicit if quote type is equal to amendment bypass. This prevents custom calculations from re-evaluating and overriding the locked historical pricing of your active, preserved contract lines.
Scenario 33. A customer wants to add an additional software add-on midterm to their existing contract. They demand that this new add-on terminate with their active subscriptions on their current renewal date, but the sales rep is accidentally quoting a full 12-month term, creating overlapping contracts. How do you configure native termination?
Answer: I would resolve this by leveraging standard CPQ amendment quote behaviors instead of custom field automation. When a sales rep initiates an amendment directly from the active contract record, the engine automatically determines the remaining contract term. Standard CPQ dynamically sets the amendment quote's end date to match the parent contract's active end date. Any new product option or add-on added to this amendment quote automatically inherits this end date, ensuring that proration and price calculations are calculated natively. This completely eliminates manual dates and prevents overlapping contracts. Pro tip: to ensure termination functions flawlessly on amendments, make sure the contract's end date field is fully populated and the account record's renewal settings are clean. This allows the core engine to instantly establish the master target date on quote creation, keeping calculations perfectly automated.
Scenario 34. A sales ops user checks the standard contracted checkbox on an activated order, but the expected contract record is never generated. The transaction silently stalls, blocking the billing queue and downstream provisioning. How do you troubleshoot this background contraction failure?
Answer: background contraction runs asynchronously and can fail due to data mismatch, validation rules, or apex limits. I would diagnose with these steps. 1. Inspect the apex jobs queue. Check the apex jobs log for failed entries matching the CPQ contract services queuable or batch classes to isolate any unhandled system runtime exceptions. 2. Verify field mapping integrity twin fields. Audit any custom fields mapped from the order product to the subscription or asset objects. If an order product field value violates a validation rule or a character limit on the target object, the transaction is rolled back. 3. Check order product settings. Confirm that the order products have contracted set to true and that they are mapped to products with subscription pricing or asset conversion configured. If they are standard one-time non-asset items, no contract will generate. 4. Validate order activation state. Ensure the order record is in a fully activated status. The CPQ contraction engine will strictly ignore draft orders to preserve data integrity. Pro tip: a highly common cause of contracting failures is custom validation rules on the subscription or contract objects that require a field that the order product does not map. Ensure all custom validation rules on these target records explicitly bypass background system actions.
Scenario 35. A global enterprise client signs a single multi-million-dollar master agreement. However, their internal structure requires child subsidiaries, differing legal entities, and distinct billing accounts to pay for specific products in the contract. How do you model this without splitting the unified CPQ contract?
Answer: I would design this by separating the contract management layer from the transactional billing routing layer. To preserve a clean contract lifecycle, I would keep a single, unified contract record linked to the primary parent account, which guarantees a single, synchronized renewal and amendment cycle. To handle the subsidiary and billing account routing, I would establish custom lookup fields on the quote line and order product records such as billing account and legal entity. Downstream billing processes evaluate billing account and legal entity assignments to split the transactional data appropriately while keeping contract lifecycle management unified. Pro tip: leverage standard parent-child account hierarchies and associate the child accounts as billing accounts on the parent. This allows your sales reps to easily select the correct paying entity from a drop-down in the quote line editor, which then flows natively through twin fields to the order product.
The universal interview tip. Whenever you ask a tech VP or an industry mentor how to crack a tough interview, they all give you the exact same tip. Get familiar with the most commonly asked interview questions. It sounds simple, right? But here is the problem. The search nightmare. Finding the actual most commonly asked questions for senior roles is a nightmare. Generic Google searches only give you basic textbook definitions, and those will not help you clear a lead architect or senior engineer round where production reality matters. Imagine a master vault. Now, imagine a vault where the absolute most commonly asked interview questions for your specific role are already collected for you, perfectly organized by interview rounds like 1. Most commonly asked technical-based question and answers. 2. Most commonly asked scenario-based question and answers. 3. Most commonly asked real-world problem-solving question and answers. 4. Most commonly asked system design question and answers. 5. Most commonly asked behavioral-based question and answers. Cross-domain mastery. I built the ACE Interviews Master Vault for the modern architect. We did not just do this for one role. We covered everything: SAP, cybersecurity, DevOps, software testing, data engineering, Java, and Python. The ultimate all-access deal. Instead of paying for individual PDFs, you can now unlock our entire database. Get over 1,000 plus PDFs containing 50,000 plus of the most asked question and answers for a mere 1,499 rupees a month. The elite transformation. Stop studying just to pass. Equip yourself with the cross-domain confidence of a true architect and walk out of your next interview choosing between 2 or 3 elite job offers. Unlock the vault now. The era of buying individual guides is over. Click the link in the video description below right now to unlock the Master Vault. Now, let's get back to the Masterclass.
Scenario 36. A customer operating under a 3-year subscription for 100 user licenses requests a mid-term reduction to 40 user licenses due to corporate downsizing. The sales rep is struggling to process this negative transaction without corrupting the historical contract values. How do you process this partial cancellation?
Answer: I would execute this natively using a negative contract amendment to calculate the correct proration and billing credits. The sales rep begins by clicking the standard amend button on the active contract. On the resulting amendment quote, the rep navigates to the target subscription line and changes the quantity field from 100 to 40. The CPQ engine automatically calculates the difference of negative 60 units, computes the exact prorated refund value based on the remaining days in the term, and generates a negative total contract value TCV. When this amendment order is contracted, it updates the original subscription's active quantity to 40 while retaining the historical pricing record. And downstream, the billing engine automatically generates a credit memo to offset the customer's previous payments. Pro tip: never delete subscription lines or manually overwrite quantities directly on the active subscription records. Doing so breaks the audit trail, creates severe discrepancies in your revenue recognition schedules, and will cause the automated renewal quote to generate with incorrect quantities.
Scenario 37. A sales operations manager triggers the standard renewal forecast on a contract, and the system successfully generates a renewal opportunity. However, when auditing the opportunity, several active software subscriptions are completely missing from the products list. How do you investigate this data mismatch?
Answer: missing lines on a renewal opportunity indicate that the subscription records fail renewal eligibility or that the contract status has dates blocking renewal generation. I would investigate with these steps. 1. Verify subscription renewal eligibility. Inspect the subscription record's renewal configuration and ensure the renewal quantity is populated and not explicitly flagged to prevent renewals. 2. Check product renewal settings. Confirm that the parent product record is eligible for renewals and does not contain custom flags or catalog overrides that bypass the renewal engine. 3. Audit contract status timeline. Ensure the contract is in an active, renewable status and that renewal forecast was not checked on the contract record prior to full subscription contraction. 4. Validate subscription active dates. Review the subscription end date values to confirm they align with or exceed the contract's active end date, as expired lines are automatically excluded. Pro tip: if the renewal opportunity was generated with missing data due to out-of-order execution, regenerate the renewal process after correcting subscription data rather than relying on manual adjustments. This ensures the data relationships remain programmatically intact.
Scenario 38. A hardware manufacturer uses CPQ to track physical server installations. During an amendment to upgrade the memory on an existing server, the contracting engine unexpectedly generates entirely new, duplicate asset records in the system instead of updating the existing ones, cluttering the inventory. What is causing this asset duplication?
Answer: asset duplication is typically caused by missing parent reference lookups, incorrect conversion settings, or background automation loops. I would troubleshoot with these steps. 1. Verify the upgraded asset link. On the amendment quote line, verify that the upgraded asset lookup field is fully populated. If this link is missing, the engine processes the upgrade as a net new asset sale. 2. Check product asset conversion. Check the asset conversion field on the product record. If misconfigured, for example, 1 per unit instead of 1 per quote line, it can force duplicate splits. 3. Validate amendment link integrity. Inspect the order product to ensure it is correctly associated with the asset being amended, letting the contraction engine recognize the upgrade target. 4. Isolate custom automation duplication. Audit background triggers and flows executing on asset insert, ensuring custom code is not intercepting the contraction thread and inserting duplicate records. Pro tip: hardware amendments often require mapping a specific, unique key like a serial number from the asset back to the quote line. Ensure this key is mapped cleanly via twin fields so background lookup rules can uniquely target the correct active asset record.
Scenario 39. The finance team wants to discontinue old, heavily discounted legacy pricing. They mandate that when contracts come up for renewal, the renewal quote must pull the latest, current catalog price book rates rather than carrying over the historically negotiated rates. How do you implement this pricing policy?
Answer: I would implement this requirement by configuring the standard renewal pricing method field across your product catalog. On the product records or the parent contract record, I would set the renewal pricing method to list instead of same. When set to same, the renewal engine copies the negotiated customer price from the active subscription record. When set to list, the pricing engine ignores the legacy negotiated rates and queries the active price book for the latest standard list price when generating the renewal quote. This natively enforces current market rates on all renewal opportunities without requiring complex custom pricing scripts. Pro tip: if you need to grandfather certain strategic accounts into legacy pricing while forcing the rest of the catalog to current list rates, create a custom formula field on the account record that defines their pricing tier, and use a price rule to dynamically toggle the contract's renewal pricing method between same and list upon contract creation.
Scenario 40. A major customer acquires 3 smaller companies, each operating under a different active subscription contract with your firm. The customer demands to merge all 4 active contracts into a single master service agreement with a single, unified billing and renewal stream. How do you handle this contract consolidation?
Answer: since there is no native automated merge button for active contracts in CPQ, this must be handled as a structured entitlement migration and transition project. I would select the primary contract to serve as the master contract and then coordinate a clean transition of active subscriptions. This involves terminating active subscriptions from the secondary contracts, which generates the necessary billing adjustment credits, and simultaneously moving those active entitlements under the master contract via positive amendments. Aligning the start dates in terms of these moved lines to match the master contract's end date ensures that you consolidate the active commercial footprint into a single renewal stream while preserving complete audit history. Pro tip: to minimize manual overhead during large-scale contract consolidations, build a guided screen flow that orchestrates the dual amendment process. The flow identifies the source subscriptions, automates the cancellation inputs on the old contracts, and inserts the aligned target lines onto a single master contract amendment quote, ensuring a clean and error-free consolidation.
Category 4 Conclusion.
Mastering contract management is what secures the long-term relational value of your customer base. By configuring standardized co-termination rules, establishing clean database-level twin fields to prevent contract activation failures, and executing precise negative amendment cancellations, you protect the commercial integrity of your active contract data. This guarantees that your historical footprint remains pristine, audit-ready, and optimized for future expansion.
The universal interview tip. Whenever you ask a tech VP or an industry mentor how to crack a tough interview, they all give you the exact same tip. Get familiar with the most commonly asked interview questions. It sounds simple, right? But here is the problem. The search nightmare. Finding the actual most commonly asked questions for senior roles is a nightmare. Generic Google searches only give you basic textbook definitions, and those will not help you clear a lead architect or senior engineer round where production reality matters. Imagine a master vault. Now, imagine a vault where the absolute most commonly asked interview questions for your specific role are already collected for you, perfectly organized by interview rounds like 1. Most commonly asked technical-based question and answers. 2. Most commonly asked scenario-based question and answers. 3. Most commonly asked real-world problem-solving question and answers. 4. Most commonly asked system design question and answers. 5. Most commonly asked behavioral-based question and answers. Cross-domain mastery. I built the ACE Interviews Master Vault for the modern architect. We did not just do this for one role. We covered everything: SAP, cybersecurity, DevOps, software testing, data engineering, Java, and Python. The ultimate all-access deal. Instead of paying for individual PDFs, you can now unlock our entire database. Get over 1,000 plus PDFs containing 50,000 plus of the most asked question and answers for mere 1,499 rupees a month. The elite transformation. Stop studying just to pass. Equip yourself with the cross-domain confidence of a true architect and walk out of your next interview choosing between 2 or 3 elite job offers. Unlock the vault now. The era of buying individual guides is over. Click the link in the video description below right now to unlock the Master Vault. Now, let's get back to the Masterclass.
Transition from Category 4 to Category 5.
A stable contract database is the mandatory starting point, but actively maintaining and renewing those accounts over time is where the majority of enterprise revenue is secured. Keeping customers on track requires handling tiered upsells, processing downgrades, automating renewal pipelines, and scaling calculation engines to process tens of thousands of contracts without hitting platform ceilings. We now transition to the recurring revenue engine. Category 5. Subscription and Renewal Management.
Category 5. Subscription and Renewal Management.
Subscription and Renewal Management governs the automated processes that retain and expand recurring contract value. This category deep dives into processing tier upgrades, calculating complex proration math, troubleshooting renewal quantity discrepancies, designing touchless auto-renewal engines, and architecting massive batch pipelines. Mastering these scenarios ensures you can scale system operations, eliminate renewal revenue leakage, and align sales forecasting with contracted recurring revenue.
Category 5. Subscription and Renewal Management.
Here are the 10 critical subscription and renewal management scenarios we will solve in this category. Scenario 41. Swapping subscription plan tiers mid-contract via negative and positive amendments. Scenario 42. Calculating and configuring seat proration for mid-term subscription expansions. Scenario 43. Processing subscription tier or seat downgrades gracefully prior to renewal. Scenario 44. Troubleshooting incorrect quantity calculations on newly generated renewal quotes. Scenario 45. Designing a touchless, automated auto-renewal pipeline with opt-out locks. Scenario 46. Configuring an annual commitment subscription with a monthly recurring invoice cycle. Scenario 47. Reconciling pipeline forecasting discrepancies between opportunities and active contracts. Scenario 48. Processing simultaneous upgrades and downgrades on a single amendment quote. Scenario 49. Analyzing the downstream quote to cache impacts of shifting billing frequencies. Scenario 50. Designing a scalable, asynchronous renewal batch pipeline for 20,000 active contracts. Total 10 scenarios. Let's dive into Scenario 41.
Scenario 41. A SaaS customer operating under an active contract requests to upgrade their subscription tier from the professional plan to the enterprise plan mid-contract. The sales rep is struggling to calculate the remaining financial balance and execute the plan swap cleanly. How do you process this mid-contract tier upgrade?
Answer: this is best handled using a balanced net upgrade amendment transaction to preserve the audit trail. The sales rep initiates an amendment directly from the active contract. On the amendment quote, the rep adds the new enterprise plan subscription at its standard list price. Simultaneously, the rep navigates to the active professional plan subscription line and reduces its quantity to 0. The Proration engine automatically calculates the remaining value of the professional plan as a negative line item credit and offsets it against the prorated cost of the new enterprise plan on the identical quote. This produces a clean net upgrade cost for the customer and swaps the active entitlements upon contracting. Pro tip: to ensure that the renewal engine knows to renew only times the new enterprise plan, ensure the upgraded subscription relationship is maintained so future renewals recognize only the replacement entitlement. If the original subscription is not cleanly associated with the upgraded line, the automated renewal engine may mistakenly attempt to renew both plans on the next cycle, causing billing errors.
Scenario 42. A customer wants to add 50 additional user seats mid-term to their active subscription. The corporate finance team requires precise, day-level proration calculation to prevent margin leakage, while the sales team needs the seat additions to map cleanly to the original contract. How do you configure this expansion proration?
Answer: I would leverage the native subscription proration engine to calculate the prorate multiplier and manage the seat expansion. 1. Set proration precision. In the CPQ package settings, configure the standard subscription proration precision to day to enforce exact, day-level proration math. 2. Calculate the prorate multiplier. When the rep initiates an amendment, the engine automatically calculates the prorate multiplier based on the formula of remaining days in the term divided by the default subscription term. 3. Apply multiplier to quote line. The pricing engine applies this multiplier directly to the unit list price of the 50 added seats on the amendment quote, producing an accurate prorated net total. 4. Contract the amendment. Contracting updates the active subscription footprint according to the organization's subscription model while preserving amendment history. Pro tip: if your business frequently processes mid-term seat expansions, configure the preserve bundle structure on amendment package setting. This prevents reps from accidentally modifying the quantities of the base bundle's core features while they are upgrading the user seats.
Scenario 43. A customer requests to reduce their seat count by 30% and downgrade their support level at their upcoming renewal. The sales rep is attempting to process this midterm, which would trigger complex, negative retroactive billing refunds that corporate policy prohibits. What process would you instruct the rep to follow?
Answer: I would instruct the rep to process this downgrade strictly on the upcoming renewal quote rather than executing a midterm amendment. First, allow the standard renewal process to execute automatically, generating the renewal opportunity and the draft renewal quote based on the active footprint. The sales rep then opens the renewal quote before it is finalized, reduces the seat quantity, and swaps out the support SKU for the lower tier. This allows the system to calculate the lower contract value ACV and ARR starting on day 1 of the renewed term, avoiding any midterm refund calculations and preserving historical billing alignment. Pro tip: to protect corporate margins from unapproved downsells, write a validation rule on the quote line object. If the quote type is renewal and A line's quantity is reduced or A price is lowered compared to the original subscription record, the rule blocks the edit unless a custom-approved downgrade waiver check is enabled by the sales operations team.
Scenario 44. A sales rep opens a newly generated renewal quote and reports that the quantities on the subscription lines are completely incorrect, for example, displaying 50 seats when the active contract footprint has 100. This blocks the rep from sending the renewal proposal. How do you troubleshoot this quantity mismatch?
Answer: quantity mismatches are caused by uncontracted amendments, subscription overrides, or pending transaction dates. I would investigate with these steps. 1. Audit pending amendments. Check if a previous midterm amendment order was created but never fully contracted. If the active quantities are not fully processed on the contract, the renewal engine reads outdated baselines. 2. Inspect quantity overrides. Inspect renewal-specific quantity overrides on the active subscription records. If a user or custom trigger manually wrote an override, the renewal quote will ignore the standard active quantity. 3. Analyze amendment start dates. Ensure no pending amendments were scheduled to start times after times the renewal quote was generated, as the renewal engine cannot process future dated transactions. 4. Check asset/subscription duplication. Verify that custom cloning rules or background triggers did not duplicate or drop records during previous contraction events. Pro tip: if the renewal quote was generated with corrupted quantities due to uncontracted data, you must cancel the incorrect renewal quote. Ensure all active amendment orders are fully contracted, and then regenerate the renewal quote to pull a clean active baseline.
Scenario 45. A SaaS company requires active subscriptions to renew automatically and generate renewal quotes and orders without sales rep intervention, unless a formal cancellation notice is logged. How would you design this touchless auto renewal pipeline?
Answer: I would design this using an automated batch pipeline built with standard CPQ automation and scheduled flows. I would create a scheduled flow that runs daily, querying active contracts that have reached their renewal decision window and do not have a custom cancellation notice checkbox enabled. The flow automatically checks renewal forecast and renewal quoted on the eligible contracts, letting the background CPQ services generate the renewal opportunity and renewal quote. Once calculated, the engine automatically advances eligible contracts through the organization's predefined renewal workflow, while routing exceptions to operations teams for manual audit. Pro tip: implement a strict opt-out gate. If a customer logs a cancellation request, a custom flow automatically unchecks the contract's renewal flags, sets the renewal pricing method to null, and blocks the scheduled batch from executing, ensuring the auto-renewal engine strictly respects customer cancellation notices.
The universal interview tip. Whenever you ask a tech VP or an industry mentor how to crack a tough interview, they all give you the exact same tip. Get familiar with the most commonly asked interview questions. It sounds simple, right? But here is the problem. The search nightmare. Finding the actual most commonly asked questions for senior roles is a nightmare. Generic Google searches only give you basic textbook definitions, and those will not help you clear a lead architect or senior engineer round where production reality matters. Imagine a master vault. Now, imagine a vault where the absolute most commonly asked interview questions for your specific role are already collected for you, perfectly organized by interview rounds like 1. Most commonly asked technical-based question and answers. 2. Most commonly asked scenario-based question and answers. 3. Most commonly asked real-world problem-solving question and answers. 4. Most commonly asked system design question and answers. 5. Most commonly asked behavioral-based question and answers. Cross-domain mastery. I built the ACE Interviews Master Vault for the modern architect. We did not just do this for one role. We covered everything: SAP, cybersecurity, DevOps, software testing, data engineering, Java, and Python. The ultimate all-access deal. Instead of paying for individual PDFs, you can now unlock our entire database. Get over 1,000 plus PDFs containing 50,000 plus of the most asked question and answers for a mere 1,499 rupees a month. The elite transformation. Stop studying just to pass. Equip yourself with the cross-domain confidence of a true architect and walk out of your next interview choosing between 2 or 3 elite job offers. Unlock the vault now. The era of buying individual guides is over. Click the link in the video description below right now to unlock the Master Vault. Now, let's get back to the Masterclass.
Scenario 46. A SaaS provider sells a software subscription with a strict 12-month commitment. However, to accommodate customer budget cycles, they must invoice the client monthly rather than billing the entire annual total upfront. How would you configure this subscription product?
Answer: I would decouple the subscription commitment term from the downstream invoicing cycle using standard product and billing configurations. 1. Configure subscription pricing. On the product record, Set subscription pricing to fixed price and configure the subscription term to 12 to establish a standard annual baseline. 2. Set invoicing frequency. Map standard frequency parameters on the quote line and order product records to dictate monthly billing behaviors. 3. Generate invoices. Downstream billing processes generate the monthly invoice schedule, while the subscription commitment remains annual. 4. Enforce cancellation penalties. Write a custom validation rule that blocks the billing or sales ops teams from canceling the order mid-term unless an early termination fee is applied. Pro tip: if you need to track the monthly recurring revenue MRR separately from the annual total contract value TCV, make sure your analytics team references the subscription MRR field on the subscription record, which standardizes recurring revenue metrics across differing terms.
Scenario 47. The corporate finance team reports that the sales pipeline forecast, driven by renewal opportunities, is severely mismatched against the actual contracted recurring revenue on active contracts. How do you systematically investigate and reconcile this forecasting discrepancy?
Answer: pipeline forecasting mismatches occur when pricing rules, pending transactions, or contract states diverge. I would investigate with these steps. 1. Audit pricing method mismatches. Verify if the parent contract's renewal pricing method is set to same while custom price rules are mistakenly recalculating prices on the renewal opportunity, creating an artificial pricing delta. 2. Identify uncontracted amendments. Locate active amendment orders that are approved but not yet contracted. The contract lacks these additions, while the renewal opportunity continues to track outdated baselines. 3. Analyze multi-year proration deltas. Check if multi-year contract values are mapped incorrectly to standard yearly pipeline records, inflating the annual recurring revenue ARR forecast. 4. Inspect uplift and discount schedules. Ensure that automated renewal uplift percentages, for example, a standard 5% annual price increase, are applied consistently across both the contract subscriptions and the renewal opportunity products. Pro tip: to maintain absolute finance and sales alignment, establish a nightly reconciliation script that compares the opportunity total with the source contract's recurring value. If the discrepancy exceeds 1%, flag the contract for manual audit before the forecasting reports are exported.
Scenario 48. During a midterm negotiation, a customer wants to expand their seat count for product A by 50 units upgrade and simultaneously reduce their seat count for product B by 20 units downgrade. How do you process these simultaneous, offsetting transactions cleanly on a single amendment?
Answer: this is best handled as a single, net-neutral amendment transaction to keep the contract footprint clean. The sales rep clicks amend on the active contract. On the single resulting amendment quote, the rep navigates to product A and increases the quantity by 50, and then navigates to product B and decreases the quantity by 20. The Proration engine automatically calculates both lines, offsetting the credit generated by the downgrade of product B against the cost of the upgrade of product A. The system calculates the net commercial impact of the amendment before contracting, ensuring a balanced, co-terminated state that updates both subscription records simultaneously upon contracting. Pro tip: be extremely careful with nested bundle dependencies during offsetting amendments. If product B is a parent bundle and product A is an optional feature inside it, reducing product B can automatically force a reduction in product A. Ensure your validation rules allow independent quantity edits during amendment execution to prevent system conflicts.
Scenario 49. A SaaS customer renegotiates their contract to shift their payment terms from annual upfront billing to quarterly billing. Sales wants to make this change mid-term. What are the key quote-to-cash architectural impacts and risks that you must analyze?
Answer: this shift impacts the entire quote-to-cash continuum, affecting cash collections, invoicing overhead, and billing schedules. Changing the billing frequency field from annual to quarterly alters downstream billing. In billing, the system shifts from a single annual invoice run to 4 distinct quarterly invoice runs. The major architectural impacts are: 1. Cash flow. Upfront cash collection decreases. 2. Revenue recognition. Ensure the revenue recognition rule still recognizes revenue over the full 12-month term daily or monthly amortized rather than skewing based on the new invoice boundaries. 3. Invoicing overhead. Processing fees and collection volumes quadruple. Pro tip: never attempt to change the billing frequency directly on an active, partially billed order product. This will corrupt the active billing schedule. Instead, force the transition to occur at the upcoming renewal, or execute a structured cancel and replace amendment to close out the old annual order product and activate a clean quarterly order product.
Scenario 50. A global enterprise client has 20,000 active subscription contracts that all reach their renewal date on the exact same day. Triggering standard, synchronous renewal checks causes the system to freeze, breach Apex CPU limits, and crash. How do you design a highly scalable, asynchronous renewal process?
Answer: to handle this transactional volume, I would design an asynchronous chunked batch pipeline that completely decouples the CPQ calculations from the main execution thread. 1. Build a scheduled batch Apex class. Do not use point-and-click renewal checkboxes. Develop a batch Apex class that queries the 20,000 contracts and chunks them into small, manageable scopes, for example, 50 contracts per batch. 2. Utilize supported renewal services. Call supported renewal services, PIs, or batch-enabled renewal processes inside the batch execution to queue and process calculations off the main transaction thread. 3. Stagger renewal phases. Schedule the renewal forecast batch to generate the renewal opportunities to execute 30 days prior, and schedule the renewal quoted batch to generate the renewal quotes 15 days later to distribute the system load. 4. Implement automation bypass gateways. Embed static bypass booleans in all custom triggers and flows. When the renewal batch is executing, disable non-critical automation to maximize CPU efficiency. Pro tip: on highly complex, high-volume contracts, disable automated renewal quote generation entirely. Instead, generate only the renewal opportunity in the background, and let sales reps trigger the renewal quote on demand, distributing the heavy CPQ calculation load across the user base.
Category 5 Conclusion.
Mastering subscription and renewal management is what turns single transactional deals into compounding, predictable revenue streams. By building dynamic downgrade gates on renewal quotes, configuring clean billing schedules for long-term commitments, and deploying asynchronous, chunked batch pipelines for high-volume renewals, you secure your recurring revenue foundation. This ensures that as your customer base scales, your operational overhead remains flat and your forecasting remains accurate.
Transition from Category 5 to Category 6.
While managing predictable, flat-rate subscriptions is the core of most modern commercial architectures, enterprises are increasingly offering flexible, consumption-driven pricing to align costs directly with customer value. This introduces dynamic, unpredictable billing events where customer invoices vary month to month based on usage. We now transition to the most mathematically fluid layer of the platform. Category 6. Usage-based billing and consumption models.
Category 6. Usage-based billing and consumption models.
Usage-based billing and consumption models govern how dynamic, volume-based transactions are rated, summarized, and invoiced. This category deep dives into designing hybrid subscription plus usage product models, processing high-frequency raw usage logs without system lag, managing mid-term consumption tier adjustments, and configuring credit rollovers. Mastering these scenarios ensures you can scale metering integrations and deliver accurate, friction-free consumption billing.
Category 6. Usage-based billing and consumption models.
Here are the 4 critical usage-based billing scenarios we will solve in this category. Scenario 51. Designing a hybrid product model combining flat rate and variable consumption. Scenario 52. Processing and rating high-frequency usage data from external systems accurately. Scenario 53. Managing consumption tier proration and overage calculations during midterm amendments. Scenario 54. Modeling usage-based rollover credits and unused credit balance expirations. Total 4 scenarios. Let's dive into Scenario 51.
Scenario 51. A SaaS enterprise wants to offer a hybrid commercial model. A flat-rate $500 monthly platform fee combined with variable, usage-based consumption charges for data processing volume. How do you design this product and billing model to support unified quoting and contracting?
Answer: I would architect this hybrid model using a native product bundle with dynamic rating linkages to support unified billing pipelines. 1. Establish the product bundle. Create a parent product bundle representing the primary software suite. 2. Configure the platform option. Add the platform fee as a recurring product option inside the bundle, set to a monthly billing frequency. 3. Define the consumption option. Add the data processing SKU as a usage-based product option, configuring the usage component to be rated through the organization's consumption pricing model rather than standard recurring list pricing. 4. Establish pricing parameters. Create and associate the pricing metrics to define the unit-based consumption tiers, for example, 0 to 50 gigabytes included, and any overage billed at a fixed rate per gigabyte. Pro tip: always ensure that both the recurring flat rate option and the variable usage-based option are bundled together under a single parent SKU. This guarantees that when the sales rep executes a future amendment, standard contract co-termination rules will automatically apply to both the flat rate fee and the usage schedule.
Scenario 52. An external cloud metering platform generates millions of raw API consumption logs every hour. Attempting to load this massive volume of raw data directly into Salesforce causes system lockups, API limit breaches, and billing calculator failures. How do you design a scalable integration to process and invoice this usage?
Answer: to prevent system lockups, I would design a decoupled 3-tier rating architecture that leverages an external mediation layer to handle high-frequency processing. 1. Deploy an external mediation layer. Use middleware or an external database to capture the high-frequency hourly logs, keeping raw, unstructured transactions off the platform. 2. Aggregate usage logs. Configure the mediation layer to pre-aggregate raw hourly records into daily or weekly consolidated usage totals per customer. 3. Ingest via API. Programmatically push the aggregated usage records into standard usage objects, mapping them dynamically to the customer's active usage summary record on the contract. 4. Execute asynchronous rating. Let the standard rating engine run in the background to automatically associate the aggregated records with their matching consumption schedules to produce rated totals. Pro tip: standard billing runs should capture the pre-rated usage summaries rather than attempting real-time calculations. This isolates the high-volume rating calculations from the synchronous invoice generation process, ensuring fast and reliable billing runs.
Scenario 53. A customer exceeds their data processing usage tiers mid-month. Concurrently, they execute a mid-term amendment to expand their seats, modifying the active contract term duration. How do you configure and manage consumption tier limits and overage calculations under these mid-term proration changes?
Answer: this requires a clean understanding of how consumption thresholds are evaluated during contract amendments. Instead of assuming automatic platform proration, the rating model must evaluate whether included consumption thresholds, tier boundaries, or overage boundaries require proportional adjustment based on the amended service period and the organization's billing policy. For overages, the system evaluates the total accumulated usage within the updated period. If the consumption crosses these conditionally adjusted boundaries, the rating engine dynamically applies the correct overage rate to any units exceeding that threshold, protecting the bottom line while maintaining clean financial integrity. Pro tip: to prevent customer disputes, avoid calculating overage charges on a strict real-time daily basis. Instead, rate usage progressively, but finalize overage calculations and invoice totals at the end of the billing cycle, allowing the engine to evaluate the customer's total consumption across the complete prorated period.
Scenario 54. A customer purchases a credit pool representing $5,000 worth of consumption. They request that any unused credits at the end of the monthly billing period roll over to the next month, rather than expiring. How do you model rollover logic and credit expirations?
Answer: I would model this as a prepaid consumption system combined with an automated balance carry forward mechanism. First, configure the pre-purchase consumption product representing the customer's purchased $5,000 credit pool. As consumption is rated, the system deducts the rated amount from the active balance. For rollovers, design standard automated flows that run at the end of the billing period. If an eligible balance remains, the rollover automation transfers the remaining balance into the next consumption period using the organization's prepaid consumption balance management model to adjust the target ledger records dynamically. Pro tip: to prevent liability from rolling over indefinitely on your balance sheet, always configure a strict expiration date on rolled over credits. Use automation to set a hard reset on the rollover balance at the end of the fiscal year, automatically processing expired balances according to the organization's revenue recognition and accounting policies.
Category 6 Conclusion.
Mastering usage-based billing and consumption models empowers your organization to capture dynamic, high-volume revenue streams. By establishing robust external mediation layers, configuring dynamic tier boundaries, and implementing scalable rollover mechanics, you prevent the underlying platform from collapsing under high-frequency data loads. This ensures accurate, friction-free invoicing regardless of how aggressively the customer consumes the service.
The universal interview tip. Whenever you ask a tech VP or an industry mentor how to crack a tough interview, they all give you the exact same tip. Get familiar with the most commonly asked interview questions. It sounds simple, right? But here is the problem. The search nightmare. Finding the actual most commonly asked questions for senior roles is a nightmare. Generic Google searches only give you basic textbook definitions, and those will not help you clear a lead architect or senior engineer round where production reality matters. Imagine a master vault. Now, imagine a vault where the absolute most commonly asked interview questions for your specific role are already collected for you, perfectly organized by interview rounds like 1. Most commonly asked technical-based question and answers. 2. Most commonly asked scenario-based question and answers. 3. Most commonly asked real-world problem-solving question and answers. 4. Most commonly asked system design question and answers. 5. Most commonly asked behavioral-based question and answers. Cross-domain mastery. I built the ACE Interviews Master Vault for the modern architect. We did not just do this for one role. We covered everything: SAP, cybersecurity, DevOps, software testing, data engineering, Java, and Python. The ultimate all-access deal. Instead of paying for individual PDFs, you can now unlock our entire database. Get over 1,000 plus PDFs containing 50,000 plus of the most asked question and answers for mere 1,499 rupees a month. The elite transformation. Stop studying just to pass. Equip yourself with the cross-domain confidence of a true architect and walk out of your next interview choosing between 2 or 3 elite job offers. Unlock the vault now. The era of buying individual guides is over. Click the link in the video description below right now to unlock the Master Vault. Now, let's get back to the Masterclass.
Transition from Category 6 to Category 7.
Whether you are selling flat-rate subscriptions or highly variable consumption models, the ultimate goal of any commercial transaction is realizing the revenue. A mathematically perfect quote is useless if it fails to convert into an order, generate an invoice, and post to the general ledger. We now transition from front office quoting to the critical financial bridge. Category 7. CPQ Plus Billing Integration and Order to Cash.
Category 7. CPQ Plus Billing Integration and Order to Cash.
The Order to Cash O2C workflow represents the operational spine of Revenue Cloud. It dictates how data securely traverses the gap between sales activity and financial realization. This category deep dives into the architectural data flow across quotes, orders, assets, and invoices. Mastering these scenarios ensures you can troubleshoot stalled order activations, fix missing invoice lines, and design compliant revenue recognition schedules that satisfy stringent corporate audits.
Category 7. CPQ Plus Billing Integration and Order to Cash.
Here are the 4 critical order-to-cash integration scenarios we will solve in this category. Scenario 55. Architecting the full Q2C or O2C data flow and defining key integration boundaries. Scenario 56. Troubleshooting back-end order creation failures after a quote is successfully approved. Scenario 57. Designing compliance-driven revenue recognition schedules for disparate product types. Scenario 58. Diagnosing delayed invoice generation and missing line items on active orders. Total 4 scenarios. Let's dive into Scenario 55.
Scenario 55. A newly appointed CFO wants a whiteboard architectural walkthrough of the entire quote-to-cash data flow. They are concerned about data silos between sales and finance, leading to audit compliance risks. How do you explain the full flow, including key objects and integration points between CPQ, orders, contracts, and billing?
Answer: I would break down the architecture into 3 sequential transformation layers, demonstrating how business transaction data traverses multiple lifecycle stages while maintaining traceability and auditability. 1. The commercial layer quote to order. Upon approval, the primary quote and its quote lines generate an order and order products. This locks in the negotiated pricing and establishes the transactional fulfillment record. 2. The entitlement layer order to contract or asset. When the order is contracted, subscription-based order products generate subscriptions on a contract record, while physical products generate standalone asset records, establishing the long-term historical footprint. 3. The financial layer order to invoice. Downstream billing engines pick up the activated order products based on their billing rules, aggregating them into invoices and invoice lines for customer distribution. 4. The compliance layer invoice to GL. Finally, revenue recognition rules evaluate the invoice lines and order products to distribute the revenue across accounting periods, posting to the general ledger. Pro tip: twin fields are one of the key mechanisms used to preserve data consistency across the lifecycle. However, in enterprise ecosystems, ensure your data dictionaries are aligned across middleware, event frameworks, and external ERP mappings to maintain end-to-end auditability.
Scenario 56. An end-of-quarter mega deal is approved, but when sales operations checks the ordered checkbox on the opportunity, the background process fails. The deal is stuck in CPQ, and finance cannot generate the invoice, jeopardizing revenue targets. What are the common causes and how do you troubleshoot this?
Answer: order generation failures are almost always caused by data mapping mismatches or downstream validation blocks. I would systematically investigate these common failure points. 1. Audit order product validation rules. Check if there are active validation rules on the order or order product objects that require a field value which the quote line is failing to provide during the background insert. 2. Verify twin field picklist values. If a custom picklist field is mapped from the quote line to the order product, verify that the picklist value sets match exactly. A restricted picklist on the order product will block the creation if the quote line sends an unapproved value. 3. Check active currency and price books. Ensure the opportunity currency aligns with the active price book, and that the specific products have active price book entries in the identical price book being passed to the order. 4. Analyze background trigger recursion. Inspect the debug logs to ensure custom Apex triggers on the order object are not exceeding SOQL limits or throwing null pointer exceptions during the synchronous creation event. Pro tip: to proactively prevent order creation bottlenecks, establish a policy that excludes the CPQ system user or automated integration profiles from standard front office validation rules on the order object. Validation should occur before the quote is approved, not when the system is attempting to automate the order.
Scenario 57. A company sells software requiring monthly amortization, physical hardware recognized upon delivery, and implementation services recognized upon milestone completion. The finance director complains that revenue is being recognized upfront indiscriminately, risking severe ASC 606 compliance breaches. How do you design these differing revenue recognition schedules?
Answer: I would architect this by strictly decoupling the invoicing schedules from the revenue recognition schedules, utilizing the billing engine's native compliance rules. On the product records, I would assign distinct revenue recognition rules. For the software, I would map a rule that dictates a daily or monthly amortization over the subscription term. For the hardware, the rule would mandate recognition triggered strictly by the organization's fulfillment or delivery event, as defined by accounting policy. For the services, I would link the recognition rule to a manual or system-driven milestone completion event. This design ensures that even if the customer is invoiced upfront for the entire bundle, the downstream revenue schedule records safely defer and recognize the revenue across the correct financial periods according to the assigned policy. Pro tip: when handling ASC 606 or IFRS 15 requirements, collaborate closely with the ERP or finance team to ensure that the GL rules associated with your revenue treatments correctly route unearned funds to a deferred revenue liability account, before reclassifying them into the appropriate earned revenue accounts upon recognition.
Scenario 58. Following order activation, the scheduled monthly billing run executes successfully. However, the generated invoices are completely missing the physical hardware line items, causing a $250,000 revenue leakage that the CFO manually caught. How would you investigate and fix this invoice generation failure?
Answer: missing invoice lines usually stem from missing eligibility dates, suspended billing controls, or mismatched configuration rules on the order product. I would troubleshoot with these steps. 1. Verify billing eligibility dates. Inspect the target order product to ensure the scheduled billing start date is populated. If it is null or set to a future date outside the current billing run's target date range, the engine will safely ignore the line. 2. Verify billing suspension controls. Ensure that any manual or automated billing hold flags on the order product are set to false. Often, physical products are placed on billing suspension until shipping tracking or delivery confirmation is logged. 3. Audit billing configuration. Verify that the product's billing rules are configured to generate invoices. For example, they are not mistakenly configured as non-invoiceable items. 4. Confirm order product activation state. Ensure that the specific order product line item has successfully transitioned to an active status. Billing engines will strictly bypass any draft or unactivated order lines, regardless of their dates. Pro tip: a very common cause of missing one-time physical products on invoices is billing triggers and charge type alignment. One-time charge types often require targeted date parameters to be explicitly mapped via automation during order activation. Otherwise, the billing engine skips them.
Category 7. Conclusion.
Mastering CPQ and billing integration ensures that your commercial transactions are cleanly translated into realized revenue. By decoupling invoicing from revenue recognition schedules under strict compliance guidelines and optimizing downstream billing suspension controls, you protect the business from massive accounting write-offs and billing leaks. This establishes a highly auditable, compliant bridge from a sales representative's initial quote all the way to the corporate general ledger.
The universal interview tip. Whenever you ask a tech VP or an industry mentor how to crack a tough interview, they all give you the exact same tip. Get familiar with the most commonly asked interview questions. It sounds simple, right? But here is the problem. The search nightmare. Finding the actual most commonly asked questions for senior roles is a nightmare. Generic Google searches only give you basic textbook definitions, and those will not help you clear a lead architect or senior engineer round where production reality matters. Imagine a master vault. Now, imagine a vault where the absolute most commonly asked interview questions for your specific role are already collected for you, perfectly organized by interview rounds like 1. Most commonly asked technical-based question and answers. 2. Most commonly asked scenario-based question and answers. 3. Most commonly asked real-world problem-solving question and answers. 4. Most commonly asked system design question and answers. 5. Most commonly asked behavioral-based question and answers. Cross-domain mastery. I built the ACE Interviews Master Vault for the modern architect. We did not just do this for one role. We covered everything: SAP, cybersecurity, DevOps, software testing, data engineering, Java, and Python. The ultimate all-access deal. Instead of paying for individual PDFs, you can now unlock our entire database. Get over 1,000 plus PDFs containing 50,000 plus of the most asked question and answers for a mere 1,499 rupees a month. The elite transformation. Stop studying just to pass. Equip yourself with the cross-domain confidence of a true architect and walk out of your next interview choosing between 2 or 3 elite job offers. Unlock the vault now. The era of buying individual guides is over. Click the link in the video description below right now to unlock the Master Vault. Now, let's get back to the masterclass.
Transition from Category 7 to Category 8.
A standardized order-to-cash process works beautifully when contracts remain completely static. However, the true complexity of enterprise quoting emerges when customers demand mid-term modifications, requiring sales operations to execute upgrades, downscales, and term extensions simultaneously. We now transition to the most mathematically complex high-risk operational domain of Revenue Cloud. Category 8. Advanced Amendments, Renewals and Proration.
Category 8. Advanced Amendments, Renewals and Proration.
Advanced Amendments, Renewals and Proration govern the highly fluid calculations that occur when an active contract is modified mid-cycle. This category deep dives into executing simultaneous product swaps and term extensions, evaluating co-termination strategies for disparate customer portfolios, and reconciling renewal forecasting gaps against actual corporate financial reports. Mastering these scenarios ensures you can protect margin integrity and secure high forecast accuracy on recurring revenue pipelines.
Category 8. Advanced Amendments, Renewals and Proration.
Here are the 3 critical advanced amendment and renewal scenarios we will solve in this category. Scenario 59. Processing multi-action, amendments, upgrades, downgrades, and term extensions in a single quote. Scenario 60. Strategic evaluation of co-termination versus individual end dates for complex client portfolios. Scenario 61. Reconciling pipeline forecasting discrepancies between automated opportunities and financial records. Total 3 scenarios. Let's dive into Scenario 59.
Scenario 59. A major SaaS customer wants to restructure their account mid-term. They request to upgrade 100 user seats to the enterprise plan, cancel 50 professional seats, add an analytics add-on, and extend their master contract term by an additional 12 months. How do you process this complex multi-action amendment in a single transaction without breaking the proration engine or downstream revenue schedules?
Answer: a single amendment transaction may be used when platform limits and business rules support processing the combined change set, though large enterprise architectures frequently split these workloads to protect transaction boundaries. 1. Initiate the amendment quote. Generate the amendment quote directly from the active contract, which establishes the original term baseline and locking the historical contract lines. 2. Process upgrades and add-ons. Add the enterprise seats and the new analytics add-on at their standard list prices, letting the engine apply the prorated multiplier based on the remaining days in the active term. 3. Execute downgrade offsets. Reduce the professional plan quantity to 0 to generate an offsetting negative line total, allowing the proration engine to calculate the correct credit balance. 4. Extend the master term. Adjust the master quote end date to allow the amendment process to evaluate the commercial impact of the term extension and apply the organization's proration and contracting policies, preserving clean revenue recognition boundaries downstream. Pro tip: for highly complex multi-action amendments, evaluate the technical payload limits of your pricing engine. If custom scripts or complex validation rules threaten to hit CPU timeouts, recommend executing the term extension and product swaps as separate, sequential amendment quotes to preserve transaction safety.
Scenario 60. A multinational client acquires several subsidiaries, resulting in a disorganized portfolio of disparate active contracts with unaligned end dates. The account manager is confused about whether to force immediate co-termination or preserve separate renewal schedules. How do you evaluate the strategic trade-offs of co-termination versus individual subscription end dates, and how do you enforce co-term?
Answer: co-termination is ideal for consolidating operational overhead, allowing the organization to process a single, unified renewal transaction and invoice per customer. However, individual subscription end dates are necessary when business units operate under independent budgets or when staggered deployment timelines cannot be consolidated. To enforce co-termination natively on amendments, configure the system so that any new midterm quote automatically inherits the parent contract's active end date. This locks the proration boundaries and ensures that any added options align perfectly with the master renewal date, protecting downstream invoicing from date misalignment. Pro tip: if you must support a hybrid model where some products co-terminate and others do not, leverage standard line, item grouping, or product-level configurations to override the master contract end date on specific exception lines, providing business flexibility without corrupting core co-termination rules.
Scenario 61. During a quarterly business review, the finance team reports a 12% discrepancy between automated CPQ renewal forecasting opportunities and actual booked revenue reports, threatening pipeline reliability. How do you systematically investigate and reconcile these recurring revenue forecasting gaps?
Answer: forecasting discrepancies are caused by uncontracted data, misaligned pricing methods, or currency conversions. I would execute the following investigation. 1. Identify uncontracted amendments. Locate approved amendment opportunities that have not been fully contracted. The contract lacks these additions, while the renewal opportunity continues to track outdated baselines. 2. Validate pricing method mismatches. Verify if the contract's configured renewal pricing strategy matches the pricing assumptions used in the finance reports, and check if automated uplifts are misaligned. 3. Check proration multiplier normalization. Confirm that multi-year contract values are not being flatly aggregated into a single year's ARR forecast, inflating the annual recurring revenue pipeline. 4. Validate exchange rate variations. In multi-currency environments, investigate if dated exchange rates applied to the active contract differ from the rates used to generate the renewal opportunity. Pro tip: to maintain absolute finance and sales alignment, establish a nightly reconciliation script that compares the opportunity total with the source contract's recurring value. If the discrepancy exceeds 1%, flag the contract for manual audit before the forecasting reports are exported.
Category 8 Conclusion.
Mastering advanced amendments, renewals, and proration is what secures your business from margin erosion during complex, mid-term account restructures. By designing flexible, platform-agnostic term extension policies, strategically managing co-termination event lifecycles, and establishing continuous automated reconciliation models for renewal opportunities, you protect the commercial integrity of your pipeline. This aligns sales operational agility with precise, compliance-driven forecasting.
The universal interview tip. Whenever you ask a tech VP or an industry mentor how to crack a tough interview, they all give you the exact same tip. Get familiar with the most commonly asked interview questions. It sounds simple, right? But here is the problem. The search nightmare. Finding the actual most commonly asked questions for senior roles is a nightmare. Generic Google searches only give you basic textbook definitions, and those will not help you clear a lead architect or senior engineer round where production reality matters. Imagine a master vault. Now, imagine a vault where the absolute most commonly asked interview questions for your specific role are already collected for you, perfectly organized by interview rounds like 1. Most commonly asked technical-based question and answers. 2. Most commonly asked scenario-based question and answers. 3. Most commonly asked real-world problem-solving question and answers. 4. Most commonly asked system design question and answers. 5. Most commonly asked behavioral-based question and answers. Cross-domain mastery. I built the ACE Interviews Master Vault for the modern architect. We did not just do this for one role. We covered everything: SAP, cybersecurity, DevOps, software testing, data engineering, Java, and Python. The ultimate all-access deal. Instead of paying for individual PDFs, you can now unlock our entire database. Get over 1,000 plus PDFs containing 50,000 plus of the most asked question and answers for a mere 1,499 rupees a month. The elite transformation. Stop studying just to pass. Equip yourself with the cross-domain confidence of a true architect and walk out of your next interview choosing between 2 or 3 elite job offers. Unlock the vault now. The era of buying individual guides is over. Click the link in the video description below right now to unlock the Master Vault. Now, let's get back to the Masterclass.
Transition from Category 8 to Category 9.
While executing mathematically sound midterm contract modifications and establishing precise forecasting models is critical, these processes must operate within a broader, secure, and fully integrated enterprise IT landscape. A Revenue Cloud implementation cannot exist in a vacuum. It must synchronize seamlessly with external ERP financial ledgers, handle massive historical data migrations, and enforce strict, compliance-driven sharing models. We now transition to the governance layer. Category 9. Integrations, Migration, and Governance.
Category 9. Integrations, Migration, and Governance.
Integrations, migration, and governance govern how Revenue Cloud securely interfaces with the broader enterprise technology ecosystem. This category deep dives into designing bi-directional ERP integration patterns, executing low-risk legacy subscription data migrations, optimizing multi-currency quote line editors for high-scale global operations, and constructing strict, audit-compliant sharing models. Mastering these scenarios ensures you can deliver a highly performant, secure, and scalable commercial platform.
Category 9. Integrations, Migration, and Governance.
Here are the 4 critical integrations, migration, and governance scenarios we will solve in this category. Scenario 62. Designing bi-directional integration patterns between Revenue Cloud and external ERP financial systems. Scenario 63. Executing a low-risk migration strategy for legacy subscription data, assets, and active balances. Scenario 64. Optimizing quote line editor calculation performance for large global quotes with complex localized taxes. Scenario 65. Constructing strict, audit-compliant security models to segregate sales data from central finance records. Total 4 scenarios. Let's dive into Scenario 62.
Scenario 62. An enterprise wants to replace their legacy billing middleware and integrate Revenue Cloud with an external ERP system, such as NetSuite or SAP for master pricing and real-time order synchronization. The integration team is concerned about data race conditions and dual ownership of pricing, leading to downstream invoicing failures. How do you design this integration?
Answer: I would architect a decoupled, asynchronous integration pattern that defines clear data boundaries and enforces single system ownership across the Revenue Cloud and ERP boundary. 1. Define a single system of ownership. Define a single system of ownership for product catalog and pricing data, ensuring pricing authority resides in one authoritative platform and is not maintained in parallel. 2. Synchronize orders asynchronously. Use a robust, middleware-driven event framework to push fully activated orders and order products from CPQ and billing to the ERP asynchronously, preventing user-save UI timeouts. 3. Integrate billing and invoicing. Generate invoices within the organization's designated billing platform and transmit the required financial postings to ERP. 4. Establish a bi-directional exception queue. Build a dedicated, transactional exception queue to cleanly capture and flag any schema validation, currency mismatch, or tax calculation failures between the systems. Pro tip: map custom external IDs like ERP account or SKU keys as twin fields starting from the opportunity down to the invoice line to guarantee absolute data traceability across systems.
Scenario 63. A company is migrating 5,000 active legacy subscriptions and assets, along with open historical invoices, into a newly implemented Revenue Cloud environment. If historical lines are loaded incorrectly, the automated renewal engine will fail, and downstream finance reporting will show massive discrepancies. How do you handle this legacy data migration?
Answer: migration of legacy active subscriptions requires a highly structured strategy to prevent future renewal failures. Instead of trying to recreate the entire multi-year historical invoice chain, you should load the minimum viable active commercial state required to support future amendments, renewals, reporting, and billing operations. For historical assets, load them with their active matching lookup references to support clean future amendments. For open invoices, migrate only the open financial balances required for operational continuity, while retaining historical closed transactions within their system of record. Pro tip: when migrating active subscription data, set standard price rules and validation rules to bypass the data migration user profile. If active CPQ automation executes on historical imports, it will trigger unexpected price overrides and validation blocks, completely corrupting the migrated data.
Scenario 64. Global sales reps dealing with massive, multi-currency quotes with complex regional taxes complain that saving a quote takes over 2 minutes, leading to abandoned transactions and missed sales SLA windows. How do you optimize the calculation engine for these global payloads?
Answer: latency in complex global quotes is caused by synchronous tax evaluation and heavy localized calculation loops. I would optimize performance using these steps. 1. Move non-critical tax calculations. Move non-critical tax calculations out of the real-time QLE execution path, executing heavy tax evaluations asynchronously upon final quote submission or on demand to protect active pricing performance. 2. Leverage platform native multi-currency features. Avoid custom Apex rules for exchange rate calculations, and leverage standard, platform-native dated exchange rates to minimize engine overhead. 3. Enable large quote experience thresholds. Configure standard large quote threshold boundaries to offload complex, multi-currency calculations to background system queues. 4. Consolidate summary variables. Refactor expensive, individual summary variables evaluating across the entire QLE array into streamlined, metadata-driven lookup rules. Pro tip: high latency in global quotes is often caused by the browser attempting to render hundreds of lines in multiple currencies simultaneously. Ensure that fields not critical to active sales negotiations are removed from the quote line editor field set to minimize rendering payload.
Scenario 65. A strict data governance audit requires that sales reps must only see and edit their own territory's deals, while central finance and audit teams require global, read-only visibility across all quotes, contracts, and invoices. How do you implement this compliant sharing model?
Answer: this requires combining standard sharing models, criteria-based sharing rules, and enterprise-grade restriction policies to protect the data layer. First, configure the organization-wide defaults OWD for quotes, contracts, and invoices to private to completely restrict open visibility. For sales reps, use role hierarchies and dynamic territory management to automatically grant read and write access strictly to records within their assigned sales pipeline. For the central finance team, deploy appropriate permission sets, sharing constructs, and reporting access controls, granting global visibility without edit authority across the entire quote-to-cash object lifecycle. This ensures absolute compliance with corporate audit requirements while keeping sales focused on their territory deals. Pro tip: be extremely careful when using custom Apex sharing on invoice objects. If high-volume automated invoice runs attempt to insert thousands of records simultaneously, complex Apex sharing rules can cause heavy database locks and serial execution timeouts. Rely on standard, criteria-based sharing rules wherever possible to ensure maximum system throughput.
Category 9 Conclusion.
Mastering integrations, migration, and governance is what secures your platform's operational scalability and data integrity across the corporate enterprise. By defining clean single-system pricing ownership boundaries, migrating only the minimum viable active commercial state to protect the automated renewal engine, and deploying robust permission sharing controls, you deliver a highly secure, audit-ready environment. This establishes a high-performance foundation capable of supporting complex transactions at global scale.
The universal interview tip. Whenever you ask a tech VP or an industry mentor how to crack a tough interview, they all give you the exact same tip. Get familiar with the most commonly asked interview questions. It sounds simple, right? But here is the problem. The search nightmare. Finding the actual most commonly asked questions for senior roles is a nightmare. Generic Google searches only give you basic textbook definitions, and those will not help you clear a lead architect or senior engineer round where production reality matters. Imagine a master vault. Now, imagine a vault where the absolute most commonly asked interview questions for your specific role are already collected for you, perfectly organized by interview rounds like 1. Most commonly asked technical-based question and answers. 2. Most commonly asked scenario-based question and answers. 3. Most commonly asked real-world problem-solving question and answers. 4. Most commonly asked system design question and answers. 5. Most commonly asked behavioral-based question and answers. Cross-domain mastery. I built the ACE Interviews Master Vault for the modern architect. We did not just do this for one role. We covered everything: SAP, cybersecurity, DevOps, software testing, data engineering, Java, and Python. The ultimate all-access deal. Instead of paying for individual PDFs, you can now unlock our entire database. Get over 1,000 plus PDFs containing 50,000 plus of the most asked question and answers for mere 1,499 rupees a month. The elite transformation. Stop studying just to pass. Equip yourself with the cross-domain confidence of a true architect and walk out of your next interview choosing between 2 or 3 elite job offers. Unlock the vault now. The era of buying individual guides is over. Click the link in the video description below right now to unlock the Master Vault. Now, let's get back to the masterclass.
Transition from Category 9 to Category 10.
While maintaining robust system integrations and enforcing strict security boundaries is essential for platform stability, truly unlocking the value of Revenue Cloud requires mastering the platform's advanced, programmatic, and specialist capabilities. When standard configurations hit platform governor limits or complex business scenarios demand multi-dimensional pricing, you must utilize the platform's deep programmatic extension layers. We now transition to the peak of the system's technical capabilities. Category 10, Advanced Architecture and Specialist Features.
Category 10. Advanced Architecture and Specialist Features.
Advanced architecture and specialist features govern the deepest, most complex capabilities of the platform. This category deep dives into multi-dimensional quoting MDQ setups, zero-code twin field data mapping, programmatic JavaScript quote calculator plugins QCP, parallel and conditional advanced approvals, and native order splitting models. Mastering these scenarios ensures you can deliver robust, highly tailored solutions for complex pricing, approval, and fulfillment requirements.
Category 10. Advanced Architecture and Specialist Features.
Here are the 5 critical advanced architecture scenarios we will solve in this category. Scenario 66. Configuring multi-dimensional quoting MDQ to support year-over-year pricing variations. Scenario 67. Architecting seamless end-to-end data flow across commercial records using zero-code twin fields. Scenario 68. Programmatically implementing quote calculator plugins QCP to bypass platform limits. Scenario 69. Designing parallel and conditional advanced approvals to eliminate transaction bottlenecks. Scenario 70. Configuring native order splitting rules to handle complex multi-phase fulfillment timelines. Total 5 scenarios. Let's dive into Scenario 66.
Scenario 66. A sales rep is negotiating a strategic 3-year subscription with an enterprise buyer. To win the deal, they discount year 1 heavily, but keep years 2 and 3 at full list price. Sales wants to quote this as a single subscription line item, but standard flat rate quoting forces them to create 3 separate quotes, breaking invoicing. How do you configure this pricing model?
Answer: I would configure standard multi-dimensional quoting MDQ to allow year-over-year pricing segmentation within a single quote line. 1. Create the price dimension. On the targeted subscription product record, create a price dimension record with the type set to year to segment the product. 2. Initialize QLE segmentation. When the product is loaded into the quote line editor, the system automatically splits the single line into 3 distinct yearly segments. 3. Apply segmented discounting. Instruct the sales rep to apply the negotiated discount percentage directly to the year 1 segment, leaving year 2 and year 3 at standard list price. 4. Contract the aligned entitlements. Contracting preserves the segmented commercial structure required to support future renewals, reporting, and downstream billing processes. Pro tip: for MDQ products, ensure the renewal pricing strategy is evaluated carefully. Aligning segment behaviors dynamically on renewal prevents major renewal revenue leakage.
Scenario 67. A custom delivery priority code is captured on the quote line during negotiation. Operations mandates that this data must map dynamically to the order product and eventually the subscription and asset record to automate downstream fulfillment, but the IT team has locked down custom flow or Apex development. How do you architect this data flow?
Answer: this data flow can be achieved natively and without code by leveraging standard twin fields. In modern CPQ systems, the platform can automatically propagate supported field values across supported transactional object relationships using twin field patterns, reducing the need for custom automation. For assets, you duplicate the identical field on the asset object. This zero-code approach guarantees low administrative overhead, maintains fast transaction speeds, and ensures clean operational continuity from quote line and order product down to the active entitlement. Pro tip: to prevent data mismatches during the twin field transaction flow, always ensure that field-level parameters like character limits, decimal precision, and pick list values match perfectly across all target objects. If a quote line field is 100 characters, but the order product field is limited to 50 characters, the data may truncate or trigger errors. delaying order contracting.
Scenario 68. A business requires multi-variable pricing calculations, API callouts to an external inventory system, and dynamic SQL like lookups during active quoting. Standard price rules are throwing CPU timeouts and hitting SOQL limits. When and how would you implement a quote calculator plugin QCP?
Answer: a programmatic JavaScript-based quote calculator plugin QCP should be reserved for scenarios where standard configurations are insufficient, letting you execute complex calculations in a single transaction thread. 1. Evaluate performance boundaries. Evaluate QCP when calculations require nested array loops or multi-variable calculations that threaten to exceed platform limits. 2. Develop the JavaScript plugin. Author custom, highly optimized JavaScript logic within the QCP editor to process the complex nested array lookups. 3. Pre-stage external reference data. Pre-stage external inventory, pricing, or reference data through supported integration mechanisms before quote calculation, allowing the QCP to focus on pricing logic and calculation orchestration. 4. Optimize array loop efficiency. Refactor custom QCP loops to prevent O of n squared complexity over the quote line array, safely updating the custom fields while avoiding platform CPU timeouts. Pro tip: while a QCP is extremely powerful, do not use it to replace standard, simple price rules. Keeping simple calculations in price rules and reserving the QCP for heavy mathematical operations makes the system easier to maintain and troubleshoot.
Scenario 69. A mega deal is bottlenecked because standard sequential approvals force the legal team to wait for finance to approve. Concurrently, whenever a minor quote revision is made, the sales rep is forced to resubmit and route the entire transaction through the entire approvals queue from scratch. How do you resolve these approval bottlenecks?
Answer: I would implement this by designing an advanced approvals model to replace standard sequential workflows. First, to handle parallel approvals, I would construct separate approval chains, for example, legal chain and finance chain. This allows the system to evaluate rules for both teams concurrently, letting legal and finance review and approve the quote at the same time. Second, to prevent approval fatigue, I would enable smart approvals on the approval rules. If a quote is rejected, modified, and resubmitted, the system evaluates the historical approval records. If the newly requested discount tier has not exceeded what was previously approved, the engine bypasses those specific chains and routes only the modified parameters, accelerating transaction speeds. Pro tip: to ensure a clean audit trail under smart approvals, define clear snapshot fields on the quote that capture the approved discount thresholds. If a sales rep attempts to alter non-financial fields like shipping terms after pricing is approved, the system can bypass pricing reapprovals but still trigger a legal re-evaluation, balancing compliance with speed.
Scenario 70. A customer approves a massive 500-line global quote, but their operational constraints require specific hardware to ship to 10 different global warehouses across 3 distinct implementation phases, rather than billing everything on a single invoice. How do you configure native order splitting?
Answer: I would leverage native quote line grouping and automated splitting parameters to cleanly divide the transaction payload. 1. Evaluate order decomposition. Evaluate supported order decomposition and fulfillment partitioning capabilities within the organization's platform architecture. 2. Assign splitting metadata. Create a custom field on the quote line object such as fulfillment location or deployment phase to act as the primary splitting criteria. 3. Map line grouping parameters. Instruct the sales rep to populate these fields on individual quote lines during configuration. For example, line 1 is flagged for location A, line 2 for location B. 4. Execute order generation. Configure the organization's supported order grouping mechanism to evaluate the designated fulfillment criteria during order generation, allowing the order generation process to create separate fulfillment transactions based on the grouping criteria. Pro tip: when splitting a single quote into multiple orders, the system generates separate order records but maintains their historical relationship to the primary quote. Downstream billing processes must evaluate whether these split orders require consolidated or individual invoices based on billing requirements.
Category 10. Conclusion.
Mastering advanced architecture and specialist features elevates your design from standard configuration to enterprise-grade engineering. By strategically deploying quote calculator plugins for advanced pricing requirements, utilizing MDQ for dynamic multi-year negotiations, and designing parallel advanced approvals to eliminate operational bottlenecks, you maximize transaction velocity. This ensures the platform can handle the most rigorous and mathematically demanding business requirements without compromising system performance.
The universal interview tip. Whenever you ask a tech VP or an industry mentor how to crack a tough interview, they all give you the exact same tip. Get familiar with the most commonly asked interview questions. It sounds simple, right? But here is the problem. The search nightmare. Finding the actual most commonly asked questions for senior roles is a nightmare. Generic Google searches only give you basic textbook definitions, and those will not help you clear a lead architect or senior engineer round where production reality matters. Imagine a master vault. Now, imagine a vault where the absolute most commonly asked interview questions for your specific role are already collected for you, perfectly organized by interview rounds like 1. Most commonly asked technical-based question and answers. 2. Most commonly asked scenario-based question and answers. 3. Most commonly asked real-world problem-solving question and answers. 4. Most commonly asked system design question and answers. 5. Most commonly asked behavioral-based question and answers. Cross-domain mastery. I built the ACE Interviews Master Vault for the modern architect. We did not just do this for one role. We covered everything: SAP, cybersecurity, DevOps, software testing, data engineering, Java, and Python. The ultimate all-access deal. Instead of paying for individual PDFs, you can now unlock our entire database. Get over 1,000 plus PDFs containing 50,000 plus of the most asked question and answers for a mere 1,499 rupees a month. The elite transformation. Stop studying just to pass. Equip yourself with the cross-domain confidence of a true architect and walk out of your next interview choosing between 2 or 3 elite job offers. Unlock the vault now. The era of buying individual guides is over. Click the link in the video description below right now to unlock the Master Vault. Now, let's get back to the Masterclass.
Transition from Category 10 to Category 11.
For years, enterprise quoting relied heavily on legacy managed packages, custom objects, and heavy JavaScript plugins to achieve complex commercial requirements. However, the industry is undergoing a massive architectural paradigm shift. The emerging Revenue Cloud architecture is native to the Salesforce core, powered by composable APIs, unified catalogs, and conversational AI. We now transition to the absolute cutting edge of the platform. Category 11. Modern Architecture, Agentforce, and the Core Platform.
Category 11. Modern Architecture, Agentforce, and the Core Platform.
Modern enterprise revenue architecture represents the transition from legacy managed packages to next-generation revenue lifecycle management (RLM) capabilities built on standard core objects. This category helps architects understand both legacy and emerging Revenue Cloud capabilities, including Product Catalog Management (PCM), declarative pricing engines, Dynamic Revenue Orchestrator (DRO), and Agentforce AI Copilot integrations. Mastering these modern capabilities prepares architects for the future of the platform.
Category 11. Modern Architecture, Agentforce, and the Core Platform.
Here are the 5 critical modern architecture scenarios we will solve in this category. Scenario 71. Architecting the migration from a legacy CPQ managed package to the core native revenue management platform. Scenario 72. Deploying Product Catalog Management (PCM) for seamless omnichannel distribution. Scenario 73. Implementing complex pricing waterfalls using the modern, declarative Salesforce pricing engine. Scenario 74. Orchestrating split fulfillment and asynchronous billing timelines natively using DRO. Scenario 75. Leveraging Agentforce and AI copilots to automate the quote-to-cash lifecycle via conversational prompts. Total 5 scenarios. Let's dive into Scenario 71.
Scenario 71. The CIO has mandated a migration from the legacy CPQ managed package to the modern, core native revenue architecture to unify the tech stack. However, the IT team is worried about breaking their highly customized quoting engine during the transition. What are the fundamental architectural differences they must prepare for?
Answer: migrating to the modern core architecture requires a fundamental shift in data modeling and programmatic design. I would guide the IT team to prepare for these core architectural transitions. 1. Evaluate core object compatibility. Evaluate how commercial processes can leverage standard platform objects and next-generation revenue lifecycle management (RLM) capabilities, while managing coexistence requirements with legacy implementations. 2. Introduce PCM capabilities. Introduce product catalog management (PCM) capabilities alongside existing product structures as part of a phased transformation roadmap. 3. Assess pricing engine transition. Evaluate which legacy pricing logic can be re-implemented through modern pricing capabilities and which custom extensions must remain temporarily as part of a phased transition. 4. Evaluate custom code deprecation. Audit all legacy Apex triggers and custom automations built specifically around managed package lifecycles, re-architecting them to leverage native core platform events. Pro tip: legacy CPQ data models do not map perfectly one-to-one to the modern core architecture. Invest heavily in data transformation mapping and re-architecting your product models to leverage dynamic attributes, rather than attempting a pure lift and shift of legacy bundles.
Scenario 72. A global telecom client struggles with extreme catalog bloat, maintaining separate product models for B2B and B2C commerce, direct sales, and partner portals. This duplication causes massive pricing discrepancies and sync failures across channels. How do you architect a unified model using modern product catalog management (PCM)?
Answer: I would solve this duplication crisis by architecting an API-first, centralized product catalog decoupled from specific channel presentation layers. 1. Establish a centralized master catalog. Utilize PCM as the central commercial catalog for all commercial definitions, consolidating disparate catalogs into a unified headless architecture. 2. Implement dynamic attributes. Rather than creating hundreds of distinct SKUs for minor variations, for example, phone color, storage size, configure dynamic product attributes that configure a single base product at runtime. 3. Define contextual catalogs. Use product classifications and catalog assignments to dynamically determine which subset of products is exposed to B2B and B2C commerce versus the direct sales application. 4. Leverage composable distribution. Push catalog data to external portals and downstream systems using standard, composable headless APIs, ensuring that any central change is consistently distributed across consuming channels through supported integration patterns. Pro tip: decoupling your commercial catalog logic from your UI presentation layer is the hallmark of modern architecture. By relying on API-first PCM endpoints, your B2B storefront and partner community can consume the exact same pricing and product rules without replicating the data locally.
Scenario 73. In the legacy environment, developers relied on heavy JavaScript plugins and hundreds of price rules to calculate complex volume and tiered discounts, causing maintenance nightmares and calculation timeouts. In the modern revenue management architecture, how do you handle complex pricing waterfalls and attribute-based adjustments without heavy code?
Answer: I would replace the legacy scripting layer with the native Salesforce pricing engine, utilizing a highly declarative, matrix-driven approach to execute the pricing waterfall. 1. Design lookup-driven matrices. Build pricing matrices to store all variable volume tiers, localized rates, and attribute-based adjustments as data rather than hard-coding them as individual rules. 2. Implement context rules. Configure context rules to dynamically evaluate the transaction, for example, verifying account region or customer segment to determine exactly which pricing matrix or discount strategy is eligible for the transaction. 3. Build pricing procedures. Utilize supported declarative pricing capabilities to sequence the pricing waterfall, for example, base price to volume discount to attribute adjustment to net price. 4. Invoke pricing interfaces. Ensure the quoting UI and external storefronts call supported pricing interfaces, letting the core engine process the procedural math instantly without relying on heavy client-side scripts. Pro tip: when designing pricing rules, establish a clear execution hierarchy. Group your lookup tables and attribute-based adjustments into distinct, modular pricing matrices to keep calculations performant and maintainable.
Scenario 74. An enterprise order is captured containing both instant software licenses and physical hardware, requiring a 2-week shipping lead time. Legacy systems are failing to recognize the software revenue immediately because they wait for the entire order to close. How do you handle this split fulfillment and billing timeline natively?
Answer: I would handle this complex fulfillment timeline using the Dynamic Revenue Orchestrator (DRO) to decouple order capture from order execution. I would design distinct fulfillment plans mapped to the product classifications. The software products are routed to an automated fulfillment step that provisions the licenses via API instantly upon order activation. DRO manages these parallel operational tracks natively, allowing downstream fulfillment and billing processes to proceed independently based on organizational policy, ensuring revenue flows immediately for digital goods while accurately deferring physical hardware until delivery confirmation is logged. Pro tip: map your DRO orchestration steps directly to your PCM product classes. This ensures that whenever a product manager introduces a new product, the system automatically routes it to the correct fulfillment and billing path without requiring custom order splitting development or complex Apex triggers.
Scenario 75. Sales reps are complaining about the massive UI friction and manual clicks required to navigate the catalog, apply discounts, and generate quotes, leading to low system adoption and stalled deals. How can you leverage modern AI agents and conversational interfaces to automate the quote-to-cash lifecycle?
Answer: I would recommend deploying Agentforce capabilities to assist with quote creation, catalog navigation, pricing recommendations, and guided selling workflows through approved actions and governed automation paths. The AI copilot can parse a sales rep's natural language command like draft a proposal for the Acme Corporation account using the standard enterprise package and systematically execute a series of background tasks. By calling supported APIs, the agent retrieves the correct account metadata, queries the product catalog, applies valid context rules, and drafts a quote record for the sales rep to review, reducing manual navigation while keeping a human in the loop. Pro tip: for AI agents to function predictably, your underlying product catalog management data must be impeccably structured. If your catalog lacks clear attribute metadata, logical product classifications, or clean naming conventions, the AI agent will struggle to identify the correct products from the rep's conversational prompt. AI is only as intelligent as the data architecture beneath it.
Category 11 Conclusion.
Mastering modern revenue lifecycle management capabilities, product catalog management, and Agentforce integrations is what prepares you for the next generation of the Salesforce platform. By evaluating how commercial processes can leverage standard platform objects and modern pricing services, you transition away from legacy managed package limitations. This establishes a highly extensible, API-first foundation that seamlessly scales with emerging technology.
Mastering the complete Q2C and O2C lifecycle.
Across all 75 scenarios, from product configuration and pricing waterfalls to complex contract modifications, usage billing, and platform migrations, the hallmark of a true enterprise architect is balance. Technology will continue to evolve, but the core business logic of quote-to-cash remains identical. Focus on understanding the commercial business requirements first, design robust data boundaries, and utilize standard, declarative platform features before resorting to custom programmatic extensions.
Accelerate your Revenue Cloud career.
If you found these 75 real-world scenarios valuable, make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell for more deep dives into modern architecture. To help you prepare for your next technical screening, we have this kind of masterclasses in a clean study guides PDFs in our subscription model. You can access the subscription link directly in the video description below. Thank you for watching, and we will see you in the next masterclass.
The universal interview tip. Whenever you ask a tech VP or an industry mentor how to crack a tough interview, they all give you the exact same tip. Get familiar with the most commonly asked interview questions. It sounds simple, right? But here is the problem. The search nightmare. Finding the actual most commonly asked questions for senior roles is a nightmare. Generic Google searches only give you basic textbook definitions, and those will not help you clear a lead architect or senior engineer round where production reality matters. Imagine a master vault. Now, imagine a vault where the absolute most commonly asked interview questions for your specific role are already collected for you, perfectly organized by interview rounds like 1. Most commonly asked technical-based question and answers. 2. Most commonly asked scenario-based question and answers. 3. Most commonly asked real-world problem-solving question and answers. 4. Most commonly asked system design question and answers. 5. Most commonly asked behavioral-based question and answers. Cross-domain mastery. I built the ACE Interviews Master Vault for the modern architect. We did not just do this for one role. We covered everything: SAP, cybersecurity, DevOps, software testing, data engineering, Java, and Python. The ultimate all-access deal. Instead of paying for individual PDFs, you can now unlock our entire database. Get over 1,000 plus PDFs containing 50,000 plus of the most asked question and answers for mere 1,499 rupees a month. The elite transformation. Stop studying just to pass. Equip yourself with the cross-domain confidence of a true architect and walk out of your next interview choosing between 2 or 3 elite job offers. Unlock the vault now. The era of buying individual guides is over. Click the link in the video description below right now to unlock the Master Vault. Now, let's get back to the masterclass.
For more exciting tips, tricks, and more importantly, for valuable insights of interviews, please share, like, and subscribe to my channel. It has a lot of valuable information about various insights of interviews. It has a wide range of real-world portfolio projects of various technologies for interviews, and it has wide range of most asked interview questions and answers of various technologies like data science, SAP, AWS, DevOps, and full-stack web development, and more. That will be useful during interviews. It has a wide range of most asked interview questions and answers and real-world portfolio projects of various technologies for freshers. For 2 to 3 years, experienced candidates, and for 5 or above years, experienced candidates to test their skills by knowing most asked interview questions and make themselves ready for interviews.